Chapter 57. Reverend, you mean? Shui Ruolin's voice was trembling. What triggered it? Was it the same in the past years? Qin Wanru suppressed her sadness and caught the meaning in her words. It must have been triggered accidentally in the past years. Every time it happened after the cold weather in autumn. On the one hand, it was because your grandmother couldn't stand the cold weather because of her old age. On the other hand, it might be because there was a kind of grass that bloomed in autumn and its pollen was also an important reason for your grandmother's illness. The Reverend of Jingxin Monastery said. In fact, she didn't want to tell them this at first because one was a niece who didn't care about the affairs and the other was a little granddaughter. She shouldn't tell them this. But seeing that they were really worried about old Madame Qin, she told them the truth. What kind of flower? Shui Ruolin didn't have time to be sad anymore and asked hurriedly. It's a kind of grass called Qingxiu grass. It will bloom some flowers in autumn. I've talked about it with General Qin and Madame Qin and drew some pictures. Later, I heard from Madame D that there was no such grass in the mansion, so I thought it was because of your grandmother's old age. But this time, I'm sure that it must be Qingxiu grass, and the dosage is not small. Otherwise, the disease won't happen so quickly and seriously. The Reverend of Jingxin Monastery thought for a while and told the truth. So, someone wore something made of pollen? Shui Ruolin felt it and then her face changed. It should be like this. The Reverend of Jingxin Monastery nodded and said, Old Madame also had an illness in the past years, but it was not so urgent and serious this time. Since you too accompanied Old Madame here, you have to be more careful in the treatment process. Although Jingxin Monastery doesn't have this grass, I can't guarantee that others don't have it. Does this Qingqiu grass have a smell? Something seemed to flash in Qin Wanru's mind. For people who are not sensitive to it, it doesn't have any smell and it is the same as usual. But patients like your grandmother will feel the smell early. However, you won't be able to feel it yourself. However, this Qingqiu grass tastes a little bitter, said the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery. Qin Wanru's hand trembled, and something flashed across her mind. It was a sachet that she had seen every year. Because she had seen it so many times, she was familiar with it. It had no smell, but Madame D had never been a thrifty person. She was the first miss of Duke Yong's mansion, so she was very concerned about food and clothing. Even in Jiangzhou, a place far away from the capital, she was still very high profile. She never wore old clothes, and when her ornaments were old, she would choose new styles to make them. She kept the dignity of a miss from an aristocratic family before she got married. It was the only one in Jiangzhou. This was why she would wear a sachet that she had worn for a long time. Thinking about it carefully, this sachet had appeared in the past years after the start of autumn. Grandmother, with your current body, what will happen if you smell the Qingxiu grass again? She tried hard to suppress the frenzy in her heart and said, If this smell appears around old grandma again, with her current body, I'm afraid. The Reverend of Jingxin Monastery's face darkened. Qin Wanru's hands trembled fiercely. She suddenly thought of another thing. In her previous life, when her grandmother died of illness, Madame D also wore that familiar sachet on her waist. She not only wore that sachet in Jiangzhou, but also in the capital city. Based on her character, it had already indicated that there was something wrong with it. Coldness rushed to her heart and then spread to her limbs. At this moment, her whole body seemed to be immersed in ice. It turned out that her grandmother was not only killed by her, but also killed by Madame D. It turned out that she had neglected such an important piece of information in her previous life. The hands hidden in her sleeves trembled slightly, and then she clenched them tightly. Madame D was really vicious. In this life, she would never forgive her. Will this smell stain my clothes or other ornaments? Qin Wanru finally found her voice. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice to hide the sadness in her eyes. Grandmother left her early, but it turned out that everything was planned by Madame D. At that time, there was a war at the border, and her father led the troops there. Grandmother died, and as a general who led the troops, he would naturally be robbed of his love and would not come back to observe the mourning period. Grandmother died silently, and Madame D was the sole ruler of the backyard of the general's mansion. All these things were because of the vicious Madame D. Gentle, virtuous, dignified and decent. She covered everyone's eyes. Qin Wanru sensitively guessed the important point. This sudden plot was also because of her grandmother's repeated protection of her. Because of the haste, Madame D gave herself away. If it was like in previous years, she would slowly fall ill as autumn came, and no one would think it was her. This kind of smell can easily dissipate in the wind. If she wears clothes and ornaments that have been smoked, it will not have much effect, and it will not cause an acute illness. It must be very concentrated. Of course, patients with poor health will not be able to bear even a little effect. The master of Jingxin Monastery shook her head. So, it was still that sachet. And now, the most urgent thing was to prevent Madame D from getting her hands on grandmother again. Nun, what should we do now? Qin Wanru calmed herself down and asked. We can only take it slowly and don't let old mistress smell this smell again. There is no such thing in Jingxin Monastery, but... The Reverend of Jingxin Monastery did not finish her sentence, but her meaning was clear. She had a good relationship with old mistress in the past, so there were some things that she could say. Don't worry, nun. I'll look after my aunt and carefully check the things she uses. I won't let this smell appear around her. Shui Rulin also recovered from the shock and said with a serious face. Not only the things that old grandma uses, but also other people who are close to old grandma. The master of Jingxin Monastery glanced at Shui Rulin and reminded her. I know, thank you, nun. Shui Rulin turned sideways and bowed respectfully. When she raised her head, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. Although she did not know the truth, how could she not understand the question and answer between the master of Jingxin Monastery and Qin Wanru? She took a deep breath and became more determined. It was true that she couldn't spend the rest of her life in the family temple in the backyard. She still had her aunt and Wanru, one old and one young, who needed her protection. Madame D owed her the title. Even if she was unwilling to give it to her now, she would take it. So the family members of Ningyuan Army General's mansion settled down in Jingxin Monastery. Because of old grandma's illness, she needed to rest and recuperate in the quietest room. Moreover, it was far away from the Qin sisters. Old grandma did not want to disturb the sisters' recuperation. Shui Rulin lived directly in old grandma's room and served old grandma together with Nanny Duan and Chu Xiang. For those who wanted to get close to old grandma, they had to pass through Shui Rulin first. Every time Qin Yuru came, she would ask a few questions at the door of the inner room. Old grandma did not let her enter the room. Only when Qin Wanru came, old grandma would let her in. The grandmother and the granddaughter talked in harmony. After staying in Jingxin Monastery for a few days, it could be seen that old grandma's health was much better than when she was in the general's mansion. Seeing that she had almost recovered, old grandma did not want to restrict Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin anymore. She asked the master of Jingxin Monastery to arrange another room for Shui Rulin, which was just beside Qin Wanru, so that Shui Rulin did not have to guard her every night, and she could walk around in the monastery during the day. Since old grandma had recovered, Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru were also relieved. They went to accompany old grandma in the morning and afternoon. On this day, when Qin Wanru came back from old grandma's place, she was invited to the meditation room by the master of Jingxin Monastery. Second Miss Qin, how is the thing that I asked you to find out? Asked the master of Jingxin Monastery. Is it about the medicine last time? Qin Wanru lifted her arm. After such a long time, the injury on her arm had basically recovered, and it did not hurt much when she lifted it. Yes. The master of Jingxin Monastery looked into the distance. This is not the medicine grandma applied for me, it's... Qin Wanru hesitated. Obviously, she could not tell others about Chu Luchen. It was someone else who applied the medicine for me, but he did not want others to know about him. After thinking for a while, Qin Wanru gave a vague answer. She could not say it clearly, but she did not want to lie to the master of Jingxin Monastery. It is still the same person. The master of Jingxin Monastery lowered her head and smiled bitterly. Master, you know him? Qin Wanru was stunned, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She did not expect that the master of Jingxin Monastery would know Chu Luchen. So what? The master of Jingxin Monastery sounded bitter. It has been so many years, and I don't know how he is doing. But now that the medicine is his, he should be living well. He can still meddle in other people's business. Qin Wanru suddenly felt that the master of Jingxin Monastery might have misunderstood something. The so-called "so many years" didn't sound like she was talking about Chu Luqian. He was only 14 or 15 years old today. Who is this person that you know, Nun? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and asked confusedly. Forget it, let's not talk about him. In fact, it doesn't matter if I say it or not. The master of Jingxin Monastery sighed and raised her head. There was a trace of a peaceful smile on her face. Obviously, she did not care about this matter anymore. Nun, the person you know is not a teenager? Qin Wanru was curious and could not help but ask. How could it be a teenager? The master of Jingxin Monastery said in surprise. But I met a teenager. Qin Wanru knew that they were not talking about the same person. Then is he his disciple? The master of Jingxin Monastery showed a trace of surprise on her face. Can you let him come and see me? I'm afraid I can't do that. Qin Wanru said awkwardly. She really could not make the decision for Chu Luqian. Moreover, she did not know whether this master had left or not, and it was not possible for him to stay in her backyard. Then, forget it. The master of Jingxin Monastery sighed. Let's leave it to fate. Seeing that she did not want to talk about this matter anymore, Qin Wanru changed the topic cleverly. Nun, where is Mingqiu Nun? Why didn't I see her? Qin Wanru had also looked for Mingqiu Nun these days, but she could not find her. She went out to travel a few days ago and has not come back until now. I don't know where she went. The master of Jingxin Monastery rubbed her eyebrows and said helplessly. Although her junior sister was said to be hanging in Jingxin Monastery, she actually did not spend much time in the monastery. Do you know when she will come back? Qin Wanru asked. This is really hard to say. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe spring. The master of Jingxin Monastery answered. Can you let her come back earlier? Qin Wanru asked eagerly. Second Miss Qin, why are you looking for junior sister? The master of Jingxin Monastery asked curiously. I want to learn medical skills from Mingqiu Nun. Qin Wanru told the truth. In her previous life, she lost this opportunity, and in this life, she would not lose this opportunity again. Chapter 58. Well, the master of Jingxin Monastery looked embarrassed. Can't I? Qin Wanru asked with her eyes wide open. It's not that you can't. It's just that when my sister fell in love with you, you were not willing to learn. Your old grandma also told her that you wouldn't learn. After trying a few times, she gave up and told me that she didn't want to take any apprentices in this life. The master of Jingxin Monastery said in a euphemistic way. This meant that Qiu Nun was hurt by her, so she didn't want to accept her as a disciple, or even didn't want to accept any more disciples. Thinking of this, Qin Wanru felt very guilty. In fact, it was because she didn't know how to appreciate Mingqiu Nun in her last life, and even made Mingqiu Nun sad. Master, when Mingqiu Nun comes back, I will ask her to forgive me, Qin Wanru said firmly with sincere eyes. Qin Wanru said firmly with sincere eyes. Even though she looked so young, she was inexplicably convincing. She was not a child's nonsense. The master of Jingxin Monastery couldn't help smiling. My sister has been lonely all her life, and she can't get close to anyone. But only you, she fell in love with you at first sight. This is fate. The master of Jingxin Monastery said implicitly, but Qin Wanru understood immediately, and she couldn't help lowering her head. People always paid attention to fate. It was fate that Mingqiu Nun fell in love with Qin Wanru at first sight, but if she didn't cherish it, this fate could pass by. Second miss, first miss is looking for you. Qin Wanru was stopped by Mei Shui on her way back from the master of Jingxin Monastery. Big sister, what's the matter? Qin Wanru stopped. Second miss, you will know when you come with me. Mei Shui pointed to the right with a smile. In a pavilion not far away, first miss is waiting for you. So she had been waiting for her for a long time. Qin Wanru's eyes flashed, and her lips curled up slightly. She didn't think there was anything to talk about between her and Qin Yuru. In this situation, they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, and they just maintained a peaceful relationship in front of everyone. Now, such an intimate invitation had never happened before, let alone now. Let's go. Qin Wanru did not refuse. She turned around and walked in the direction that Mei Shui pointed. She wanted to see what Qin Yuru wanted to do after being quiet for a few days. Qin Yuru sat alone in the pavilion. On one side of the pavilion, there was a small rockery. It was very quiet. However, this was not the backyard of the general's mansion. Visitors could still be seen passing by from time to time. Most of them were women, but there were a few men. Although Jingshin Monastery forbade men to stay overnight, it did not forbid men to enter during the day. The wound on Qin Wanru's face had healed, and her veil had been taken off. It could be seen that she had taken good care of herself. The original spots on her face were also very light, almost invisible. She still looked delicate and gentle. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, he stood up with a happy smile and said, "Second sister, here you are." Qin Wanru had already seen her. Her big black eyes blinked twice, and she walked towards the pavilion with a smile. "Second sister, please take a seat. I've been waiting for you here for a while." Qin Yuru was very polite. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, she reached out and poured a cup of tea for her. The teapot was placed on the stone table. It seemed that it had not been there for a long time. The water inside was still very hot, and there was a faint fragrance. It was very elegant. Qin Yuru put the petals of chrysanthemum in the tea that she liked to soak in the past. "Second sister, please." Qin Yuru looked up and pointed at the teapot with a smile. Then she picked up the tea in front of her, took a sip and said with a smile. Qin Wanru's eyes moved from the teacup to Qin Yuru's face. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, "Big sister, why are you looking for me in such a hurry?" "It's not very urgent. I just have something to discuss with you." Qin Yuru put down the teacup in her hand and still said with a smile, "What is it?" Qin Wanru's eyes flashed. "It's not a big deal. But now grandmother only has us two closest relatives. Even if you're still young, I have to discuss this with you." Qin Yuru sighed, and there was a bit of indescribable expression on her face. She waved her hand, and Mei Shui retreated to the outside of the pavilion. Then her eyes fell on Qin Yu, who was following Qin Wanru, and it seemed that she wanted to talk to Qin Wanru in private. Qin Wanru glanced at Qin Yu. Qin Yu understood and retreated to the side of the pavilion, but not too far away from Qin Wanru. "Big sister, if you have something to say, just say it. Qin Yu is my person. Even if she knows something, she won't say it." Qin Wanru said with a calm look. It's better not to let others know." Qin Yuru gritted her teeth, and there was a bit of uneasiness in her soft eyes. "Big sister, you don't want others to know about this? Then don't say it. I'm still young. If I accidentally let it slip, it'll be troublesome." Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness, and the corner of her mouth curled up. It seemed that Qin Yuru was not interested in Qin Yuru's words. Qin Yuru secretly cursed in her heart. She was so young, but she was so stubborn. After dealing with Shui Ruolin, she would deal with this bitch. Dealing with them one by one was much more effective than dealing with them together. Thinking of the importance of this matter, Qin Yuru had to smile. "Second sister, what are you talking about? Speaking of this matter, I can't find anyone to discuss it with. Although you're young, you're smart. I believe it'll be effective to discuss this matter with you." Qin Yuru suppressed the jealousy and hatred in her heart, and still said with a smile. Previously, the person sent by her mother had repeatedly instructed her not to fall out with Qin Wanru at this time. "Then, big sister, tell me." Qin Wanru said with a smile, looking very obedient. She had a delicate appearance. Although she was small, she looked bright and kind, which was very eye-catching. Jingshin Monastery was popular and there were many people coming and going. Even though it was a secluded place, it had already attracted people's attention. Some people even recognized the two misses of General's mansion. At this time, the first Miss Qin was still in the teeth of the storm. Those who recognized her became more and more curious about the conversation between them. Didn't they say that the first Miss Qin schemed against the second Miss Qin in order to climb the social ladder in the capital city? Why were they still so close to each other? Could it be that there was something fishy about this matter? Qin Wanru glanced at the faces of the people passing by and immediately knew what they were thinking. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and waited for Qin Yuru to continue. Qin Yuru's reputation in Jiangzhou was ruined. No matter how she explained, it was useless. If a few idling pilgrims saw the scene of her getting along with her sister, few people would believe it, and it would not affect the overall situation. What did Qin Yuru want to do? Her eyes looked around and fell on the rockery opposite. Second sister, do you know about Aunt Shui? Aunt Shui and father? Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Qin Yuru hesitated for a moment and suddenly leaned over and asked in a low voice. Wasn't the matter between Aunt Shui and father planned by mother? Qin Wanru raised her eyes and looked confused. This is what I secretly heard from grandmother and father. Big sister, why did mother do this? Does she not like Aunt Shui? Seeing the confused and innocent look on Qin Wanru's face, Qin Yuru's face turned a little pale. This was different from what she expected. How could Qin Wanru dare to convict her mother without saying anything? Second sister, how can you say that about mother? Qin Yuru's face darkened and she was half dead with anger. Her opening remarks were vague, and what she was going to say next was naturally the gossip about Shui Rulin. But this is what father said. Qin Wanru clearly saw the anger on Qin Yuru's face. She blinked her watery eyes and still asked in confusion. Qin Yuru was so angry that she almost couldn't sit still. She glared at Qin Wanru. This bitch still didn't know how to appreciate favors. After dealing with Shui Rulin, she would deal with this bitch. Father also was afraid that grandmother would be angry. Grandmother has always liked Aunt Shui. If she knew that this matter was planned by Aunt Shui, she would definitely be sad. Grandmother is so old, and now she is recuperating. Qin Yuru sighed, reached out to pick up the teacup at hand and took a sip. She lowered her head to conceal it. She was afraid that Qin Wanru would see the contempt and anger in her eyes. She was not a child of General's mansion. How could she get the love of grandmother and father? She was just a child picked up. If it were not for her mother, she might now be a beggar on the street. How could she have the face to fight with her? But the matter that day was indeed planned by mother. You transferred Aunt Shui's servant girl away, and let someone lead father to Aunt Shui's residence, ruining Aunt Shui's reputation. Does mother still want to plot against Aunt Shui now? Qin Wanru showed anger in a childish way. She looked at Qin Yuru and said bluntly. She looked like she was fighting for Shui Rulin. You are talking nonsense? Qin Yuru couldn't keep the smile on her face. The cup in her hand fell heavily on the table, making a crisp sound. I am not talking nonsense. Father has found out about this matter. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to ask father. Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with a hint of sarcasm, but she didn't show it on her face. She now knew what Qin Yuru meant. You don't understand. This matter has nothing to do with mother. It was not planned by mother. Think about who benefited the most from this matter. Qin Yuru said angrily. Isn't it mother? I heard that mother wants father to take Aunt Shui as a concubine. Aunt Shui is such a beautiful woman. Why does she want to be a concubine? Qin Wanru still didn't understand, but her words were very stubborn. She was a child. There were some things that Qin Yuru couldn't say, but she could. Big sister, do you not believe me? Then let's send someone to ask father. Since Madame D played tricks again, she would clear Shui Rulin's name. Wanru, you have changed. You have really been brainwashed by Aunt Shui. How could you say such things about mother and father? Qin Yuru's anger suddenly disappeared, and her face became sad. She stood up and seemed to want to hold Qin Wanru, but she had scruples and could only say in a low voice. Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with disgust when she saw Qin Yuru's gentle look. Qin Yuru's pretense could even suppress her anger. Qin Yuru liked to show this kind of look in front of Qi Tianyu in the past. She looked gentle and weak, but in fact she was as vicious as Madame D. She looked gentle, but in fact she was like a snake and scorpion. Chapter 59. Qin Yuru tightened her grip on the teacup. Qin Wanru shook her sleeves and said, Big sister, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I have to change Aunt Shui's place to rest later. Grandma is not in good health, so I can't serve her. Aunt Shui has lost a few kilograms these days. Qin Yuru's face turned livid. If she was not rational, she would have smashed the teacup in her hand on Qin Wanru's face. How could this bitch say that only she and Shui Rulin were taking care of her sick grandma? Big sister, I don't have time to spare now. I'll leave first. Qin Wanru did not wait for Qin Yuru to explain and turned to leave. Qin Yu hurriedly followed her. Although chrysanthemums were common, only the chrysanthemums given by Qi Tianyu could have such an elegant smell. Moreover, these chrysanthemums were new. When Qin Yuru drank tea a few days ago, there were no chrysanthemums in the tea. Moreover, Qin Yuru put on a pretentious look. These points made Qin Wanru sure that there was someone behind the rockery, and it was Qi Tianyu. Qin Yuru came to her senses. She wanted to shout but could not stop him. Her eyes were full of vicious hatred. After thinking for a while, she stood up and leaned against the rockery behind her. From the outside, it looked like she was holding a teacup and standing in the rockery thinking. No one noticed that she was talking in a low voice with the teacup covering her mouth. Brother Tianyu, look, Qin Wanru is now wholeheartedly for Aunt Shui. No matter when, she will be wholeheartedly for Aunt Shui. She doesn't even think that my mother is the one who raised her. Sister Wanru has really become such a person? Qi Tianyu's voice came from the rockery, with some doubts and pain. Why is she like this? I don't know. Maybe Aunt Shui said something. She is still young and ignorant. Qin Yuru looked sad, but even so, she still showed a good elder sister's face. Qi Tianyu was silent for a while in the rockery. Brother Tianyu, don't you believe what I said? With tears in her eyes, Qin Yuru slowly turned around to look at the rockery. From this position, she could vaguely see the jade-white robe on Qi Tianyu. She believed that Qi Tianyu could also see her at this moment. He had thought that by saying some specious words to Qin Wanru, no matter whether Qin Wanru understood it or not, he could make Qi Tianyu believe that he had slandered Shui Rulin. Unexpectedly, Qin Wanru dared his bluntness disrupted her plan. Fortunately, she believed that with her influence on Qi Tianyu, she would definitely be able to save him. This kind of declining trend. On the rockery, Qi Tianyu's eyes flashed. He was a little hesitant because he had clearly heard what the two sisters had said. Brother Tianyu, second sister is talking nonsense. Don't you believe me? I still want to be with you in the future. Mother's side has also been persuaded, but now Mother can't even protect herself. If I really let Aunt Shui marry Father, I don't know what will happen in the future. Qin Yuru held a handkerchief in one hand and wiped her tears in a delicate manner. Although she was not crying loudly, her sobbing made people feel more miserable. Qi Tianyu sighed and comforted her. Alright, don't cry. It's okay. I'll listen to you. I'll do whatever you want me to do. His comforting words made Qin Yuru burst into laughter immediately. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and involuntarily smiled. Brother Qi, please help me find a few ruffians. One or a few will do. I don't need them to do anything. Just ask them to stop Aunt Shui, scare her, and ruin her reputation. His words sounded gentle, as if he only wanted a few ruffians to scare Shui Rulin. But in fact, this kind of thing could not be controlled well. Of course, Qin Yuru was not satisfied with this. I can help you find her, but Qi Tianyu was still a little hesitant. He had seen Shui Rulin before. She was a gentle and quiet girl. Was she really the scheming and vicious woman that Yuru had described her to be? Was Qin Wanru really cheated by her? If it was true, this woman was too insidious. Yuru, do you want to tell Sister Wanru to be careful of Shui Rulin? Brother Tianyu, what do you mean? Don't you believe what I said? Or are you worried about Qin Wanru? If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have to separate from you. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have such a bad reputation now. You and I are now a legitimate husband and wife. Qin Yuru's tears fell again. She did not want Qi Tianyu to see it, so she hurriedly used the cup to cover her tears. But Qi Tianyu still saw it. Okay, I'll go find them later. Looking at Qin Yuru who was crying, Qi Tianyu immediately gave in. Let me know when you've found someone. I'll send someone to check on Aunt Shui. We can't really hurt her. After all, She's sincere to my grandma and she seems to want to serve my grandma sincerely, Qin Yuru said in a sweet voice to express Hert's kindness. That's right, Yuru, you're still too kind. Shui Rulin is obviously trying to please your grandma. You have to be careful. The doubts in Qi Tianyu's mind disappeared a lot. Although his mother and sister had criticized Qin Yuru did not complain about them at all. She even said that what happened that day was caused by Madame D's anger. She also said that if she was not afraid that her mother and sister would not like her, she would have secretly come to see his sister. Yuru was as gentle and kind as ever. He really could not bear to leave such a good woman. Hearing Qi Tianyu's words, Qin Yuru knew that she had achieved her goal. She was secretly proud, but she still put on a gentle expression. Brother Tianyu, what are you talking about? No matter what Aunt Shui did, she is still my father's cousin. We can't really do anything to her. We can just scare her. Qin Yuru pretended to act again. Okay, then you have to be careful. I'll go find someone and inform you when they come. Qi Tianyu nodded and said, Brother Tianyu, be careful. Qin Yuru said softly. Qi Tianyu nodded and went out from the back of the rockery. The back was close to the corner of the wall. After turning out, he went directly to the nearest door. After making sure that there was no one around, Qi Tianyu went out. He went up the mountain today because of Qin Yuru's invitation. She said that she wanted him to see Shui Rulin's true colors and whether his marriage was set up by Shui Rulin or not. Qi Tianyu immediately came here. In fact, Qin Wanru did not say anything bad about Shui Rulin. It should be Shui Rulin who deceived Qin Wanru. It was not difficult to deceive an 11-year-old girl. Qi Tianyu was in a hurry to arrange things, so he did not notice a small head poking out from behind a big tree. However, the small head was very clever. After a quick glance, it shrank behind the tree. When Qi Tianyu left, it quietly poked out its head again. It was Qin Yu. Miss, I really saw the first young master of the Qi family. He came out from behind the rockery. No wonder the first miss kept saying bad things about Miss Shui. It turns out that you wanted the first young master of the Qi family to hear it. Qin Yu reported to Qin Wanru. At this time, Qin Wanru was kneeling in a Buddha hall with her palms together and a pious look on her face. She did not really believe in these things in the past. But since she was reborn, she felt that there was God's will in the unseen world. Did you hear what they said? Qi Tianyu's appearance was not surprising. This was Jingshin Monastery. Basically, it was impossible for a man to come alone. The only one who could accompany Qi Tianyu should be Qi Rongji. It was far away, so I didn't hear it clearly. Qin Yu shook her head. After Qin Wanru left, she asked her to stay behind. Later, tell them that I am sick and ask Aunt Shui to take care of Grandma. Qin Wanru said after thinking for a while. She already had an answer in her heart. It seemed that it was very likely that this matter was aimed at Shui Rulin. Qin Yuru kept saying bad things about Shui Rulin, which was all for Qi Tianyu. According to Aunt Shui's character, she will definitely come to see me when she knows that I am sick. Since they want to do something to Aunt Shui, then we should take the initiative to avoid other uncontrollable things. Qin Wanru opened her eyes and curled her lips slightly. She simply sat on the rush cushion with her legs crossed. This Buddha hall was a little small. Until now, no one came to Qin Wanru while she was kneeling. Miss, do you mean to ask Miss Shui to come here now? If the first miss wants to plot, this is the best opportunity? Qin Yu's eyes brightened and immediately understood. Not only this. Qin Wanru shook her head. Since Qin Yuru wanted to harm Shui Rulin, she would not let her go so easily. It was better to let Qin Yuru go than to block. She would naturally give Qin Yuru such a chance. You keep an eye on Qin Yuru. This time, besides Mei Shui, there is also an old maid. You just keep an eye on that old maid and see what kind of people she will contact. Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice and said, when they arrived at Jingshin Monastery, old grandma had the most people around her. Other people, including Qin Wanru, had a personal servant girl and an old maid to help her deal with daily affairs. A servant girl was a personal servant girl. If something happened to a servant girl, it was easy to involve the master. However, an old maid was an ordinary old maid, not a supervisor nanny of a courtyard. Even if something happened to a servant girl, the master could not be involved. Moreover, the old maids were not young, and they were all very tactful, which was not comparable to the servant girls. It could be seen that it was much more convenient for old maids to do things than senior servant girls. Yes, I know. Qin Yu understood. Knowing that Qin Wanru was sick again, Shui Ruolin specially took some time to see Qin Wanru. Seeing that Qin Wanru was just a little weak, Shui Ruolin was relieved. Aunt Shui, take care of Grandma these days. When I get better, I will exchange with Aunt Shui. Lying on the bed, Qin Wanru took Shui Ruolin's hand and said coquettishly, "You're still a child. You don't have so many responsibilities. Don't worry, Aunt Shui will take good care of your grandma." Shui Ruolin smiled and reached out to touch Qin Wanru's head. "Aunt Shui is so nice." Qin Wanru became more and more innocent. Facing Shui Ruolin, she felt that she was still a child. This child? Shui Ruolin reached out to hug Qin Wanru and touched her head. Her heart was soft and she only felt that this child was obedient. Not only was she sensible, she was also filial. "Aunt Shui, when you came here just now, did you meet anyone?" Qin Wanru's eyes fell on a sachet on Shui Ruolin's waist. This was the only ornament hanging on Shui Ruolin's waist. It was a very beautiful sachet embroidered by Shui Ruolin herself. Shui Ruolin's embroidery skills had always been very good. Every time she calmed down, she would embroider some small things by herself. She would also give some to Qin Wanru. "I didn't meet anyone. What's wrong?" Shui Ruolin said with a smile. "I'm afraid that someone will offend Aunt Shui," Qin Wanru said. Lying in Shui Ruolin's arms, she stretched out her hand and gently untied the sachet on Shui Ruolin's waist. Her movements were so light that Shui Ruolin did not notice it at all. Chapter 60. Qi Rongji came to Jingxin Monastery with Qi Tianyu. She didn't want to come, but Qi Tianyu tried to persuade her again and asked her to go to Jingxin Monastery to relax. After what had happened between her and Qin Yuru, she had lost all her face. People outside had spread rumors about her, so Madame Li grounded her and forbade her from going outside, let alone knocking on the door of the general's mansion. Qi Tianyu said that he had a way to ask Madame Li for mercy, so Qi Rongji agreed to accompany Qi Tianyu to Jingxin Monastery. Qi Rongji did not like worshipping Buddha. Although they were in a temple, they were just strolling around. She did not know where Qi Tianyu had gone. When they arrived at Jingxin Monastery, they were separated. Qi Rongji was bored out of her wits. Qi Rongji did not know what to do. She wandered around in the Buddha hall, and when she came out, she didn't go back to the Buddha hall anymore. She just walked to the back mountain of Jingxin Monastery. The back mountain of Jingxin Monastery had always had good scenery. Anyone who came to Jingxin Monastery would go to the back mountain to have a look. Qi Rongji didn't worry about her brother. It wasn't the first time she came here, so it was impossible for him to leave. Maybe he met someone and talked to her, and then he would come to find her. There was a forest at the back of the mountain. Although it was still within the boundary of Jingxin Monastery, it was no longer within Jingxin Monastery. Pilgrims would basically stop at the back of the forest. There were some farmers' families outside. Although there weren't many of them, the women were afraid of being disturbed, so few people walked out of the forest and went to the farmers' families. The forest was deep and dense with trees. There was a gravel path inside, and from time to time, you could see a few octagonal pavilions. Tall bamboos were spread out, and there were clusters of small chrysanthemum. It was the time when chrysanthemum was in full bloom, so it looked elegant and leisurely. "Where's First Miss?" Strange, didn't First Miss look for Miss Shui? Why is she gone? In the quiet forest, Qi Rongji suddenly heard a servant girl's voice. She didn't pay attention to it and continued to walk a few steps. But the next time she took a step, she stopped. "I don't know where First Miss went. I thought I saw the first young master of the Qi family. Did First Miss go to see him again?" Another servant girl said. "Are you sure you didn't see wrongly?" the maid from before asked in surprise. Qi Rongji's footsteps had stopped. She turned to look behind a few trees on the right. There was a large shrub over there. Together with the trees, she could vaguely see two people dressed in maid uniforms standing there. The uniforms were very familiar. They were indeed the maid uniforms of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. No wonder Qi Tianyu was so enthusiastic to bring her here. It was because of Qin Yuru. It was because Rongji Qi Yuru. She suppressed her anger and continued to listen. How could I be wrong? Even if I was wrong, there were others. The first young master of the Qi family was hiding in the rockery while First Miss was standing outside. From my angle, I happened to see the first young master of the Qi family's clothes. It was a very beautiful robe. It seemed to be the one First Miss had made for the first young master of the Qi family. I can't be wrong, the servant girl said in a low voice. But no matter how low the voice was, Qi Rongji heard it clearly. She was so angry that her face turned pale. She had some doubts before, but now she completely believed it because the servant girl accurately said Qi Tianyu's clothes. After Qin Yuru and Qi Tianyu were engaged, Qin Yuru did make a set of clothes for Qi Tianyu in private. Qi Rongji asked Qi Rongji to send it to Qi Tianyu. No wonder Qi Tianyu's clothes looked familiar. It was Qin Yuru's. Thinking about the cause and effect, there was nothing that Qi Rongji could not understand. Her eldest brother wanted to see Qin Yuru, but he used her as a foil. Qi Rongji gritted her teeth. This time, she would never forgive Qin Yuru. Not only did Qin Yuru make her lose her reputation, but she also made her lose her marriage. Now the whole Jiangzhou prefecture was talking about her. All these were caused by Qin Yuru. Suddenly she heard two servant girls coming. She hurriedly turned around and hid behind a big tree with her servant girl. She wanted to hear more news about Qin Yuru. First Miss went to meet the first young master of the Qi family. Why did she ask Miss Shui to come out? Who knows? Maybe she didn't have any good intentions. This place is really quiet. If something happened, we can push the blame to someone else. Moreover, Eldest Miss had an alibi at that time. Eldest Miss was fine, but others might not be. First Miss is so cunning. Of course. Don't you see that First Miss Qi is also cunning? But what about now? She still fell in First Miss's hands. First Miss's reputation is not good, but First Miss Qi's is also bad. Now, people in Jiangzhou Prefecture think that First Miss and First Miss Qi are ugly. Qi Rongji's face turned blue and then green. She squeezed her handkerchief into a ball. If it were not for Qin Yuru, she would not have made such a big scandal. Needless to say, all these were deliberately arranged by Qin Yuru. This bitch. Although she did not turn around, her head was tightly pressed against the tree. Even if she did not care about her image, she had to hear Qin Yuru's plot clearly. She actually asked Qi Tianyu to testify for her. Then she, who could not ask Qi Tianyu to testify for her, would become a suspect? Qi Rongji almost went crazy with hatred. However, even if Qi Rongji still wanted to listen, the two servant girls took a detour and whispered to each other before they came close to her and left. Let's go quickly. There are too few people in this place and I feel nervous. Then let's go quickly. The two servant girls were almost gossiping, and then they gradually walked away. After they left, Qi Rongji stood out from behind the tree with a gloomy face and looked coldly at the back of the two servant girls. Let's go back. Her maid, Chun Shi, pulled her sleeve gently and looked around. Hearing the conversation between the two servant girls of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, she also felt scared. Let's go back. Qi Rongji coldly turned around and ordered in a gloomy voice, later you go to ask the servant who follows Qi Tianyu. Ask him what Qi Tianyu did today and whether he ordered him to do anything. If he dares to not tell the truth, when we go back, he will be beaten to death. Even if Qi Tianyu protects him, as long as he tells the truth that Qi Tianyu secretly met Qin Yuru and that he covered up for her, no one can protect him. Qi Rongji was sure that Qin Yuru must want to do something again, and she would never let Qin Yuru succeed. On one hand, she seduced the son of an aristocratic family in the capital city, and on the other hand, Qi Tianyu played with her brother. However, Qi Tianyu still believed her words. The more Qi Rongji thought about it, the more she felt hurt. Qin Yuru, just wait and see. Frightened by Qi Rongji's voice, Chuanxi hurriedly said, Yes, miss, I will ask him later. When Shui Ruolin came out from Qin Wanru's room, she did not immediately return to old Madame Qin's room. Before going out, Old Madame Qin repeatedly told her to worship Buddha and not to rush back. Compared with others, Shui Rulin sincerely worshipped Buddha. Just now, Qin Wanru also repeatedly asked her to worship Buddha. Sincerity worked, and Shui Rulin was the most sincere. Maybe the reason why Grandma recovered so quickly was the result of Buddha's blessing. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Shui Rulin thought for a while and was not in a hurry to go back. She took Qianghua in a direction and went to a nearby Buddha hall. She had made a wish before, and now she was going to fulfill it, hoping that her aunt's health would get better and better. Shui Rulin was very devout. She worshipped in almost every temple, unlike other pilgrims who worshipped while strolling around. Most of them mainly strolled around. In a Buddha hall, Shui Rulin just stood up and was about to walk out when she suddenly stepped back. Qianghua quickly held Shui Rulin and stared at a person opposite her. When she was about to say something, she saw that the person walked to the door without stopping, and did not even look at Shui Rulin, who was almost knocked down. "Hey, how can you be like this? You didn't even apologize after bumping into me." Qianghua angrily stamped her feet, pointing at the person's back and yelling. Shui Rulin steadied herself with Qianghua's help and looked at the person who bumped into her. At this time, she only saw a back, vaguely like a servant. Whose servant was so unruly? "Qianghua, forget it." Shui Rulin reached out and pulled Qianghua. Because of their loud noise, many people looked over. They happened to be in the largest main hall of Jingxin Monastery, and there were many pilgrims. Even if they bumped into each other, it was not a big deal. "Miss, it seems that this person did it on purpose." Qianghua lowered her head and said angrily. "Forget it, don't be angry with this kind of person." Shui Rulin smiled and shook her head. She found the direction and led Qianghua to another direction, where there was another Buddha hall. Although Qianghua was not convinced, there were so many people coming and going, and they could not find the person. Moreover, they did not even see the person's face just now, so she could only leave with Shui Rulin angrily. After they left, on the path facing the Buddha hall, Qi Tianyu's servant proudly weighed the sachet in his hand. To deal with such a miss from an aristocratic family, it was the simplest thing to bump into and steal the sachet. Compared with earrings and necklaces, it was much easier to steal. After all, those necklaces were directly worn on the body. The first young master had always been concerned about the first Miss Qin. If he could please the first Miss Qin, he would please the first young master. The servant was very proud that he could do things for the first Miss Qin. The first young master had always cared about the first Miss Qin and was very generous. Needless to say, he would definitely reward him heavily later. Thinking of this, the waiter could not help but laugh out loud. But the next moment, the servant's smile froze on his face. The road ahead was blocked. He saw his first miss standing in the middle of the road with a murderous look and looking at him coldly. The servant panicked, and his hand holding the sachet involuntarily hid behind his back. In fact, it was Qin Yuru's private request that he did this, and Qi Tianyu did not know it. Chapter 61. First Miss. The servant panicked but did not dare to escape. He came forward and saluted while trembling. "What did you take from Shui Rulin?" Qi Rongji looked at the servant and said coldly. What a coincidence that they met before looking for it. Perfume bag. The servant did not dare to hide it. He stammered and said sensibly, "What's the use?" Qi Rongji's eyes flashed. To lure Miss Shui out? The servant had been hinted by the old maid beside Qin Yuru. And then, Qi Rongji narrowed her eyes. And then, to kidnap Miss Shui. Miss Shui is just an outsider living in the general's mansion. She is actually not a very important person. Some of the words were hinted by the old maid beside Qin Yuru, and the other part was guessed by the clever servant himself. Shui Rulin was just a distant relative of the general's mansion. In fact, it was really not a big deal. Even if something happened to her and she disappeared, it was not a big deal for the general's mansion. Old Grandma, the only blood relative to Shui Rulin, was now seriously ill. Even if something really happened to Shui Rulin, she could not do anything. Qi Rongji almost immediately understood Qin Yuru's idea. Who sent them here? First young master. The servant lowered his head and murmured, "This bitch is really a vixen. She still does not intend to let my eldest brother go." Thinking of the cause and effect, Chi Rongji fiercely gritted her teeth. Even if there was really an accident, it would not be Qin Yuru. Instead, it would be her own mansion that would be involved. If she had not come to find the servant, she and her mother would not know until her eldest brother got into trouble. "Give me the perfume bag," Chi Rongji said coldly. "Your servant?" The servant's hand shrank back a little. Chuanxi took 2 steps forward and stretched out her hand. She said sternly, "Give the perfume bag to First Mississippi. Do you want First Miss Qin to protect you?" In Ningyuan Army General's mansion, Qin Yuru might be able to protect the servant. But in Magistrate Qi's mansion, all the servants in the mansion knew that their first miss was the most favored one. The servant did not dare to hide anymore. He stretched out his hand and a delicate perfume bag fell on his palm. Chuanxi snatched it and handed it back to Chi Rongji. Chi Rongji took it casually and sneered. Qin Yuru wanted to plot against Shui Ruolin, but she used her eldest brother's help. In this case, she would be the Oriole. "Since it is someone sent by my eldest brother, you should know, right?" Chi Rongji's face showed a trace of coldness. "Yes, I know a little." The servant was very nervous. The servant dared. The manservant did not dare to not step forward. He leaned over and listened while nodding. His face was pale, but he had no choice but to listen. "Miss, First Miss has sent someone to invite you again." Qin Yu came in and reported. Qin Wanru looked at the sky outside the window. It was not dark yet, but it was dusk time. It would be completely dark soon. The pilgrims who did not stay on the mountain should have gone down the mountain early at this time. Most of the pilgrims who stayed on the mountain should have come back at this time. Everyone. All, Ling Qin women, Audiobook. Yun Mississippi Qining all. Miss Qin Wang. Ling Lingwer. Let's go and have a look. Qin Wanru stood up. "Miss, do you really want to go out at this time?" Qin Yu was worried. "Let's go. It won't be long." Qin Wanru smiled and went out. Qin Yu followed her hurriedly. Outside the door was an old maid brought by Qin Yuru. When she saw Qin Wanru coming out, she hurriedly said with a smile, "Second Miss, First Miss invited you over because she has something important to tell you. If you really don't want to hear it, I will go back to report to First Mississippi." As he spoke, he pretended to leave, but his eyes were fixed on Qin Wanru. It seemed that he wanted to leave but did not want to. She was a crafty old maid. Originally, it was very useful to use her to deal with a girl from an unknown aristocratic family. Everyone was curious. Moreover, it was a girl who had not yet grown up. How could she not be hooked by her words? Qin Yuru was good at choosing people. "Let's go and have a look," Qin Wanru said. "Second Miss, please follow me." Seeing Qin Wanru was hooked, the old maid was proud and happy. "Where is Big Sister?" Qin Wanru asked with a puzzled look. "She is in the pavilion not far ahead." The old maid led the way in front of them with a smile. It was indeed not too far away, just in front of them. "What does Big Sister want to tell me?" Qin Wanru followed the old maid and asked casually. She walked slowly, and the old maid had to wait for her for a while. "Well, I don't know. She just said it's something important. Maybe it's something unknown between Second Miss and me." The old maid made up a story. "Something unknown between Big Sister and me?" Qin Wanru stopped and seemed to think carefully. She stopped, and the old maid and Qin Yu behind her also stopped involuntarily. "Well, Second Miss, let's go first." The old maid looked at the direction they were going uneasily. First Miss had told her to bring them there quickly. Qin Wanru walked again, and the old maid breathed a sigh of relief. In order to make it more convincing, First Miss had invited Second Miss before. It was the right time to invite Second Miss again. Only when Second Miss arrived could she testify for First Mississippi. If she arrived late, it would be useless. "Ah, by the way, I remember. Do you want to tell me something about Miss Qi?" Qin Wanru walked a few steps and suddenly stopped. She looked enlightened and said. The old maid felt a headache and had to laugh a few times. "Second Miss, I really don't know about it. How could First Miss tell me such an important thing? I am not the supervisor nanny of First Miss Yard." Oh, you are not Big Sister's trusted old maid? Qin Wanru came to her senses and looked up and down at the old maid. I don't seem to have seen you before. Are you really Big Sister's old maid? I have just served First Miss for a few days, and I am just an ordinary old maid. It is normal that Second Miss has not seen me before. The old maid said. Thinking of First Miss's promise to her before, she became more and more anxious. Second Miss, if you want to know what First Miss wants to say, you'd better go with me. If she didn't bring Second Miss there, she would lose the position of supervisor old maid that First Miss promised to her. Then let's go. Qin Wanru didn't embarrass the old maid this time and walked forward. The old maid was relieved and hurriedly led the way. Qin Wanru didn't ask the old maid anything along the way. She turned all the way and saw Qin Yuru in a pavilion on the roadside from a distance. It was a very conspicuous position, which happened to be a place that pilgrims would see when they came out. No matter who passed by here, they could see clearly. Second Miss, look, First Miss is over there. The old maid was relieved, reached out and pointed to Qin Wanru with a smile. Qin Wanru stopped again and slightly frowned. Why is there someone in the pavilion? Looking from a distance, there were not only Qin Yuru and her servant girl in the pavilion, but also a very ordinary-looking man. He wore the clothes of a farmer and had his back to them, so they couldn't see what he looked like. The old maid was also stunned. She didn't expect that there would suddenly be another man in the pavilion. Let's wait for Big Sister to finish her business. Qin Wanru took a step back and retreated to the door of the moon cave from which she had just come out. Qin Yu quickly followed her. The old maid hesitated for a moment. Because she didn't know what Qin Yuru wanted to do, she also retreated to the door of the moon cave. But she was still worried, so she deliberately peeped through the door of the moon cave. Looking from a distance, Qin Yuru said a few words to the farmer and then stood up. She glanced in the direction of Qin Wanru, but Qin Wanru believed that she couldn't see her. The pavilion where Qin Yuru was in had a wide view, but if she turned her back from the open place, she couldn't see clearly. Qin Yuru seemed to say a few words to the farmer and then left with him in a hurry. When Qin Yuru and her servant girl left, the old maid was also dumbfounded. The original plan of First Miss was not like this. What was going on? What should Second Miss do next? Why did Big Sister go out with a man at this time? Qin Wanru turned out from behind the old maid, and her face became cold. Who is that man? I don't know, sis. The old maid's tongue was trembling. You are the servant who serves Big Sister. If you don't even know, then what is the use of you? Qin Wanru's face became more and more gloomy. At such a young age, she made people feel that she was very powerful. She walked to the pavilion in a hurry. When she arrived at the pavilion, she only saw a pot of tea and 2 teacups on the stone table. Look around and see if there is anything wrong. Qin Wanru ordered. The old maid and Qin Yu immediately obeyed. They looked around but found nothing. If Big Sister has an accident, you are finished. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the old maid and said coldly, as if it was real. The old maid shivered and said, I come to find Second Mississippi. I really don't know what happened to First Mississippi. The old maid also panicked at this time and stared blankly. Run to report to Grandma and let Grandma send someone to find Big Sister. Qin Wanru scolded angrily. Qin Wanru's words reminded the old maid. She said yes repeatedly and ran directly to old Madam Qin's yard. Her panicked look alarmed many pilgrims who stayed overnight. At the sight of this situation, they immediately knew that something had happened. Some busybodies followed the old maid into old Madam Qin's yard. Immediately they knew that the accident should be in Ningyuan Army General's mansion. After the accident in Ningyuan Army General's mansion, would something big happen? It was true that Ningyuan Army General's mansion had been in trouble recently, which made many people want to watch the fun. Chapter 62. Hearing that Shui Ruolin had an accident, Qin Yuru thought for a while and decided not to wait for Qin Wanru. She would deal with Shui Ruolin's problem first. She followed the man and hurriedly walked to the forest behind the mountain, which was the best place to take action. Qin Yuru originally found someone to trick Shui Ruolin into coming out with her sachet and then kidnapped her here. However, the person who came here just now said that when she was about to take action, Qianghua beside Shui Rulan found something wrong and escaped. If Qianghua really ran away, it would be a big problem. Qin Yuru couldn't sit still anymore. She hurriedly ran over and wanted to help find Qianghua. Because she was anxious, she didn't pay attention to anything and followed the man in front. However, Mei Shui felt that something was wrong as they walked, so she couldn't help but gently pull her sleeve. The sky had already darkened, and the forest seemed even more serene and eerily quiet. Miss, it's too quiet? Is it possible that Qianghua has run away? Mei Shui whispered to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru stopped and looked around. It was quiet. Except for herself and Mei Shui, there was only the man dressed like a farmer in front of her. Others thought that he was a real villager, but Qin Yuru knew that he was a ruffian hired by Qi Tianyu. Her expression changed slightly. Miss, I think we'd better go back first. We'll figure out a way to deal with Qianghua later. She's just a maid. Even if she says something, Miss, you can deal with it? Mei Shui was really scared, because she saw the rogue dressed as a farmer turned around and gave her a weird smile. Qin Yuru didn't see him because she had her back to him. Although Qin Yuru didn't see him, she also felt uneasy. The environment here was too quiet, so much so that she was starting to feel flustered. She rushed into the forest recklessly just now, but now she also felt that something was wrong. She turned around and wanted to tell the ruffian that they were going back with the handkerchief in her hand. She only felt a heavy blow on the back of her head. She felt so painful that she blacked out. The last thing she saw was Mei Shui's horrified face. Miss. Mei Shui rushed forward to hold Qin Yuru and screamed. Shut up. Don't tell me you want someone to save you at this time? The ruffian smiled proudly and waved the brick in his hand, which was the thing he used to knock Qin Yuru out. You can't do this. This is our Mississippi. Do you want to die? Mei Shui tried hard to suppress the fear in her heart and shouted to encourage herself. You can only blame your first miss for offending someone. Someone wants to sell you away. In the future, we will also take a sum of money and go far away. No matter how powerful the people in your Ningyuan army general's mansion are, it doesn't matter. The voice came from behind them. Mei Shui supported Qin Yuru to turn sideways and immediately saw another ruffian. It was Qin Yuru's request to send two ruffians, one to deal with the miss and the other to deal with the servant girl. It was a piece of cake for two men to deal with two women. They were also afraid that they could only catch one and let the other slip away. But now they were not dealing with Shui Rulan, but with Qin Yuru. You are mistaken. This is our first Mississippi. Our first miss asked you to deal with Miss Shui, not our first miss herself. Mei Shui felt that there was something wrong and said loudly, You can't get money like this. Our first miss is your employer. You are mistaken. Her words made the two ruffians look at each other. It's true. You are mistaken. It is our first miss who asked you to kidnap Miss Shui. She also asked the old maid to inform you that you can go far away after the job is done. She will give you a lot of money. She also asked you to take Miss Shui away and never show up in Jiangzhou again. Did you forget that she gave you a sachet before? For fear that the two ruffians would not believe it, Mei Shui was anxious and said the truth. The two ruffians were confused at this time. Only the employer knew these things. It was impossible for others to know. But how could they be mistaken? Later, the servant said that there was a sachet for us, but then he said that there was no need to use the sachet. As long as we say this to you, you will immediately be deceived. Could it be that you know something and deliberately said so? The ruffian said in disbelief. What's the point of talking to the two of them? Just take him away. Even if we can't get the money, his face is pretty good. At the very least, we'll get a lot of money. After we sell him, we'll fly far away. Who cares about what's going on? Said the other ruffian impatiently as he looked at the sky. Ruffians like them would never argue with others about right and wrong. They would go wherever they went. Even if they were wrong, Qin Yuru could only blame it on her own bad luck. She is pretty. She is so pretty. The first ruffian turned around and looked at Qin Yuru's face. He touched her face frivolously and laughed. Then he pinched Mei Shui's face and said, You are also pretty good. Let's go. Do you want me to knock you out and take you away, or do you want to go by yourself? Mei Shui's face changed dramatically. She was so shocked that she could hardly stand. You've really made a mistake. She hurriedly took a few steps back, her body tightly leaning against a tree behind her. So what? Anyway, we kidnapped a young lady and a servant girl. You two are pretty good. Let's go. Another ruffian stretched out a hand from behind her, patted her on the shoulder and said proudly. Mei Shui's eyes turned dull. Suddenly, she reached out and pushed Qin Yuru in her arms forward fiercely. Then she leaned to the side and ran away. The two ruffians were stunned and immediately became furious. Catch her! They didn't care about Qin Yuru, who fell heavily on the ground and immediately chased after her. If a servant girl really ran away, it would be terrible. At this time, Mei Shui was also desperately running away. She knew that if she fell into the hands of the two ruffians, she would definitely not end well. However, she was a woman after all. She had always been the personal servant girl of a young lady in boudoir. She had always been delicate and noble. How could she really run away? She was caught by the two ruffians when she just ran a stone's throw away. She was slapped hard and then brought back while swearing. Qin Wanru had actually arrived earlier. Just when Mei Shui was arguing loudly, she was already standing behind a big tree. Her eyes fell on another big tree in front of her right, where a servant was standing. In fact, he had been standing there for a while. Qin Wanru first heard Mei Shui's voice and then saw the servant. Seeing that he was following her stealthily, she followed him. No matter what happened in front, the servant didn't go out and just hid behind the tree to watch the scene. At this time, seeing that Mei Shui ran away and the two ruffians went to chase her, he hurriedly rushed out and ran to Qin Yuru, who fell on the ground. He took out something from his arms and threw it to Qin Yuru. Then he immediately ran back and hid again. This process was extremely short. Of course, the two ruffians didn't notice what happened behind them because they were focused on catching Qin Yuru. Only Qin Wanru and Qin Yu saw it clearly. Because she was paying attention, she also saw the thing that was thrown. It was the sachet that she exchanged with Shui Rulin. If it was really Shui Rulin's sachet, Shui Rulin would definitely be involved if something happened to Qin Yuru. It was a good way to kill two birds with one stone. Qin Yuru reaped what she sowed, but Shui Rulin suffered for someone else. Needless to say, the servant in front of them was Qi Tianyu's servant. However, the one behind this servant was not Qi Tianyu, but Qi Rongji. Qin Yuru was like a mantis stalking a cicada while Qi Rongji was unaware of the aureole behind it. Moreover, she also transferred the blame to Shui Rulin. The two ruffians had already come back with Mei Shui. Seeing that it was the right time, Qin Wanru gently squatted down and picked up a big stone from the tree. She used her eyes to look at it and threw it at the direction of the servant who was sticking his head out. The upbringing in General's mansion was not as strict as that of other young ladies from aristocratic families. Moreover, Madame D never cared about her when she was useless. Old Grandma was not in good health. When Qin Wanru was young, she often sneaked out with Qi Baiyu to do things like beating birds and climbing over walls. Although she hadn't thrown stones for many years, she still had good eyesight. Hearing an ouch from the right front, the two ruffians were shocked and their faces changed. After looking at each other, one of the ruffians strode over and grabbed the servant who had been watching from behind the tree. "It's you!" The ruffians were relieved when they saw it was the servant who ordered them to do things. "Are you here to pay? Look at what we have done. A young lady and a servant girl are both here. Qi Hai, hurry up and tell your first young master to save our first miss." Mei Shui was beaten to the point of confusion. At this time, she only felt that her eyes lit up and she was so anxious that she cried out loudly. She knew the servant beside Qi Tianyu. Qi Hai panicked. He didn't even know what to do at this time. He was the first young master's man, so he naturally had to help First Miss Qin. However, he was now following the orders of First Miss, so he couldn't help First Miss Qin. "What's wrong with you? Don't tell me that you don't want to admit it?" The ruffian sneered. "I didn't." The servant hurriedly shook his head. He was also panicked when he was suddenly discovered. "Give us the money. We have done something for you. We have caught this pair of master and servant girl. In the future, we will help you sell them. Money is not a problem, right? The other ruffian also sneered and took 2 steps forward to force the servant to stop. The 2 ruffians also found that something was wrong. At this time, they just wanted to take the money and get it over with. The servant stepped back step by step. He had no money in his hand. Originally, first Miss Chin should pay for this matter after it was done. Later, first Miss Chin didn't want to pay for it. What, you don't want to admit it? If you dare to deny it, we will tell the truth. We will say that your master asked us to kidnap the young lady of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. The ruffian reached out to stop the servant. Chi Hai, did you and the first young master of the Chi family plot against our first miss? Why did you do this? Mei Shui also came to at this time. Seeing the scene in front of her, she screamed. Chapter 63. Our young master didn't? The servant shook his hands and explained hurriedly. Does your young master hate our young miss? But even if you bear a grudge, your eldest young master shouldn't have done such a thing. You want to ruin our young Mississippi. Mei Shui couldn't control her voice at this time because of fear and panic. She cried out loudly. Bitch, shut up. Do you want all of us to be arrested? Before the manservant could react, a ruffian turned around and gave Mei Shui 2 hard slaps. He pulled Qin Yuru up from the ground in his arms and held Qi Tianyu's manservant with his other hand. He said to another ruffian, What are you doing? Let's go, it's not safe here. Mei Shui's shouting spread far in the empty forest. Although they thought there was no one around, they were still a little panicked. Help! 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 Mei Shui was ready to risk everything and shouted at the top of her lungs. The ruffian wanted to use something to block Mei Shui's mouth, but he couldn't find anything, so he directly reached out and tore Qin Yuru's sleeve. The thin and beautiful material seemed easy to tear, and a large piece of her outer garment was torn off, even revealing a small part of her beautiful arm. He stuffed the torn sleeve into Mei Shui's mouth. The 2 ruffians pulled these people and wanted to leave. Let go of my big sister. An angry shout came from behind the people who were pulling Qin Wanru. They were all stunned and looked over. They saw Qin Wanru rushing out from behind the tree, followed by Qin Yu. 2 more, this is really a good deal? The 2 ruffians panicked at first and then became happy. These 2 were younger than the 2 before, and the one running in front was just a child. A ruffian reached out and pushed Qin Yuru into the arms of the servant, and then rushed to Qin Wanru, ready to arrest Qin Wanru and her servant. The servant didn't expect the ruffians to push Qin Yuru over, so he was hit and fell heavily on the ground with Qin Yuru, piling up under Qin Yuru. Mei Shui's eyes lit up when she saw Qin Wanru rushing out. She kicked the ruffian who had caught her. The ruffian stepped back, but he did not expect to step on Qin Yuru's foot, who had suddenly fallen down. As soon as he slipped, he lost his balance and fell on Qin Yuru's body. The pressure made the servant, who was about to get up, fall heavily on the ground again and let out a low cry of pain. Many people rushed out from the shadows of the trees and were stunned by the scene in front of them. Qin Yuru looked extremely embarrassed now. She was sandwiched between 2 men. Although the servant was only 13 or 14 years old, he was a man after all. Needless to say, the ruffian behind him was a man in his 20s or 30s. A large part of Qin Yuru's hand was still exposed in the middle. After being hit by the hooligan, Qin Yuru slowly woke up and opened her eyes blankly. Quick, quick, my big sister! Qin Wanru shouted at the stunned crowd. Qin Yu immediately rushed forward and bravely stood in front of Qin Wanru. She picked up a small stone from the ground and threw it at the face of the ruffian who rushed over. The ruffian did not expect this little servant girl to be so fierce. She picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at him. He did not notice that his face had been hit hard. When he looked back and saw so many people, he immediately knew something was wrong. He turned back, pulled up the other ruffian who was still on the ground, and ran away. Some people chased after them. The 2 ruffians were from this area and were familiar with the way. After a few turns, they got rid of the people chasing after them. Big sister, are you okay? Qin Wanru ran to Qin Yuru and reached out to help her up. Her little face was full of panic, which was in line with her age. Qin Yuru was helped up, but she was still in a daze. She looked from Qin Wanru's face to her side in a daze. Why was Qi Tianyu's servant here? First miss, it was the first young master of the Qi family who sent people to catch you. At this time, Mei Shui also rushed over and hugged Qin Yuru. She burst into tears. The feeling of surviving a disaster made her lose control for a moment. She pointed at the servant and said angrily. The servant was already panicked. At this time, he was pulled up by several old maids of Qin's mansion and put his hands behind his back. Hearing Mei Shui's words, he immediately shook his head and argued loudly, "It was not our first young master. First Miss Qin, I found that someone wanted to hurt you and wanted to save you. You misunderstood me." The servant had always been smart. At this time, he did not dare to say that it was Qi Rongji's idea. He just insisted that he happened to pass by. "First Miss, I came to see First Miss Qin under First Young Master's order. How could I harm First Miss Qin? Don't you know First Young Master's feelings for you?" At this time, the servant was also anxious. He was afraid that he would be involved, so his words had some other meaning. Others did not understand the meaning, but Qin Yuru did. Instantly, her face turned blue and then white. Now her mind was also a mess. She did not know why things changed so much. Her reaction was a little slow. "Yuru, what happened? What's going on?" A gentle voice came to her ears. Qin Yuru looked up and saw Shui Ruolin's face. Her eyes twitched fiercely. "You? How could you be fine?" I should be fine." Shui Ruolin was stunned and asked. "Just now, someone said that you had an accident. So I came here." "Aunt Shui, it turns out that someone lied to me." Qin Yuru blinked her eyes and suddenly threw herself into Shui Ruolin's arms. She cried loudly and said, "Aunt Shui, it's good that you are fine. It's good that you are fine. I thought you had an accident." "You thought I had an accident?" Shui Ruolin frowned and asked. "Yes, those two people came to say that. Were they?" At this time, Qin Yuru had already sobered up. Knowing that her plan had failed, she gnashed her teeth with hatred. But at the same time, she also knew that what she could do at this time was to blame everything on Shui Ruolin. "Big sister, is this servant the servant of the first young master of the Qi family? Why is he here? Does he have anything to do with your matter?" Qin Yuru wanted to perform again, but her sleeve was pulled by Qin Wanru. Following her hand, she saw Qi Tianyu's servant. For a moment, she did not know how to explain. Should she tell on Qi Tianyu or not? When did First Miss Qin get along with Miss Shui so well? Only a man came here, but First Miss Qin ran out with others without even asking who he was. Qi Rongji came in behind the crowd. Hearing her brother mentioned, she could not help standing out from the crowd and said sarcastically. Although she did not like her brother's infatuation with Qin Yuru, she did not want her brother to be involved in this matter. Qin Yuru's eyes fell on Qi Rongji. Her heart beat fiercely. Why was Qi Rongji here? "First Miss Qin, I don't know what's wrong with you. Seeing a man send a message, you followed him out. Is this the upbringing of your Ningyuan army general's mansion? Just because a man said a few words, you can run away with him. Now you want to drag my big brother into this again? My brother is so unlucky. Now he has nothing to do with you, but he still gets involved with you. Tell me, what are you thinking?" Qi Rongji sneered, and her eyes fell on Qin Yuru's wrist. "Look at you now. Do you still want to rely on my brother? Just now, you were pulling and pulling other men, and your clothes were disheveled. Is it because these two men said something very important to you, so you had to come here?" Qi Rongji did not intend to let Qin Yuru go so easily. Standing on a high place, she looked at Qin Yuru with sarcasm, and her words were full of sarcasm. "I really heard that it has something to do with Aunt Shui, so I came here. I'm worried about Aunt Shui." Hearing what Qi Rongji said, Qin Yuru had a bad feeling. Qi Rongji intended to frame her, but she did not dare to get Qi Tianyu involved. "Does it really have something to do with Miss Shui?" Qi Rongji asked coldly. Qin Wanru did not raise her head, and a trace of sarcasm flashed across her lips. Qi Rongji and Qin Yuru were indeed a pair of good friends, and they cooperated so well in this situation. "It really has something to do with Aunt Shui. That man said something happened to Aunt Shui." Qin Yuru cried, and her tears fell down, looking extremely pitiful. She lowered her head, looking very aggrieved, but in fact, her eyes were looking around on the ground, hoping to find the sachet of Shui Rulin, the sachet that she had planned to trick Shui Rulin into coming here. With this sachet, her words were more than half confirmed. Whose sachet is that? Chuanxi, Qi Rongji's servant girl, suddenly screamed and pointed to a place beside Qin Yuru. Yes, it's the sachet. It's the two men who came here with the sachet to trick our first Mississippi. They said that something happened to Miss Shui. Our first miss was worried about Miss Shui, so she came here and fell into their trap. Mei Shui shouted. Since Qin Yuru had such an accident, no matter what happened in the future, as a personal servant girl, Mei Shui certainly hoped to make up for her mistake. She also knew about the sachet. At this time, when she heard that the sachet was still there, she was immediately overjoyed and interrupted Qin Yuru's words to show her loyalty. Shui Rulin was stunned and subconsciously reached out to touch her waist. Her face changed dramatically, because the sachet that she used to hang on her waist was missing. And Shui? Qin Yuru cried even more sadly, as if it was all because of Shui Rulin that she suffered an undeserved disaster. Shui Rulin's hand trembled, and a small hand reached out and gently squeezed her hand. She turned her head and saw Qin Wanru's big black and white eyes. There was a trace of a calm smile in her eyes, which was very faint and flashed away. But even so, the panic in Shui Rulin's heart seemed to disappear immediately, and her heart slowly calmed down. Give me the sachet, she calmly ordered. An old maid went over and picked up the sachet from the ground, and handed it to Shui Rulin. Chapter 64. Isn't there a small Lan character on Miss Shui's sachet? Mei Shui asked anxiously. But there is no Lan character on it, and this sachet is not mine. It belongs to Yuru, right? Shui Rulin relaxed when she saw the embroidery on it. She raised her eyes and looked at Qin Yuru calmly. Qin Yuru's heart skipped a beat, and she raised her head in astonishment. Qi Rongji's heart also skipped a beat. She remembered clearly that this sachet was stolen from Shui Rulin, and she couldn't help turning her eyes to Qi Hai. Qi Hai was also panicking. He also remembered clearly that the sachet belonged to Shui Rulin, but he couldn't say anything. Qin Wanru snatched the sachet from Shui Rulin's hand, stood up, and looked at it in the light, as if she wanted to see it more clearly. There were many people who came to watch the fun, and they couldn't help looking at it. Many of them saw the word "you" embroidered on it. It's young Lady Qin's sachet. It's obviously young Lady Qin's sachet. Why did you say it belongs to Miss Shui? What's going on? Could it be that first Miss Qin's weakness has fallen into the hands of those two men, so she self-directed and self-acted this play? Jingxin Monastery was very popular, and there were many pilgrims coming and going. The wives and daughters of some rich families would often stay in Jingxin Monastery. At this time, many people were surprised when they heard what they said. This matter sounded fishy. Qin Yuru was so anxious that her face turned pale. First Miss Qin seems to be lying again. Forget it. As long as it has nothing to do with my elder brother, it's okay. Anyway, our magistrate has nothing to do with your Ningyuan army general's mansion now. It's okay for my elder brother to be implicated once. I just hope that first Miss Qin will not implicate him this time for the sake of my elder brother's feelings for you. This meant that if Qin Yuru still blamed Qi Tianyu, the magistrate of the magistrate would not be polite. Qi Rongji believed that Qin Yuru was sensible. Otherwise, if this matter was really exposed, Qi Tianyu would at most help to find the culprit, while Qin Yuru would be the mastermind who harmed others and herself. Although it was an accident, Qi Rongji was not the one who caused it. She reacted immediately. After saying this, she walked to the servant and said with a cold face, "Big brother asked you to come to me. Why are you following Miss Qin? Whatever happens in their mansion has nothing to do with us now. Let go of him." Chun, she shouted at the two old women who were holding the servant when she heard Qi Rongji's words. The two old maids looked at Shui Rulin and did not say anything. When Qin Yuru's old maid went to report, Madame Dowager asked Shui Rulin to bring some people here. Naturally, Shui Rulin was the leader now. Since the first miss had met with such a mishap and the second miss was too young to make a decision, Shui Ruolin had to take responsibility for it. Without Shui Ruolin's order, they did not dare to let go of the servant. Qin Wanru walked to the front of the servant and looked him up and down, which made the servant flustered. Although the second Miss Qin in front of him was still so small, her clear and somewhat cold eyes made him inexplicably nervous. You are the servant of the first young master of the Qi family. Why are you following Big Sister? Qin Wanru asked. I came to find our first miss, but I didn't expect to see someone trying to kidnap Miss Qin. The servant stammered and lowered his head. That means this matter has nothing to do with the first young master of the Qi family? Qin Wanru smiled slightly with coldness. Qin Wanru, what do you mean by that? How could my elder brother have anything to do with this woman? Ever since this woman climbed up the social ladder of Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city, our mansion has nothing to do with her. It's this servant who can't see things clearly and still wants to help Qin Yuru. Hearing what Qin Wanru said, Qi Rongji was unhappy and snorted coldly. Big sister, what do you think of this matter? Qin Wanru ignored her and looked at Qin Yuru. At this time, Qin Yuru had been helped to stand up. Hearing Qi Rongji's words, she was angry and resentful and wanted to slap Qi Rongji on the spot. Ningyuan Army General's mansion repeatedly dealt with the matter in a low-key manner, which was a big thing, a small thing and a small thing, so that no one would remember this matter. Qi Rongji actually mentioned this matter in front of so many people, but she did not dare to really refute, for fear of revealing the real cause of this matter. She could only bite her teeth and swallow her anger. Wanru, let him go. It should have nothing to do with him. I was also cheated by someone. The person took the sachet and said it was Aunt Shui's. I didn't even look at it and followed him. I didn't expect, as Qin Wanru spoke, she began to sob again. But this is not Aunt Shui's sachet. Hearing that Qin Yuru still insisted that it was Shui Ruolin's sachet, Qin Wanru sneered in her heart, but did not show it on her face. She held the sachet in her hand and shook it, looking innocent and ignorant. Big sister, this is your sachet. I don't know why it is mine. Maybe I dropped it just now. Qin Yuru's tears kept flowing, and she felt wronged. Maybe when those people caught First Miss, you broke free. Mei Shui hurriedly followed Qin Yuru's words and made up a story. But her words reminded people of the appearance of the ruffian pressing on Qin Yuru just now. Some onlookers showed contempt on their faces. Not only what happened just now was despised, but what happened before was also strange. This first Miss Qin seemed to have a problem. The words of Miss Qin and the servant girl did not match, and her behavior was flustered. In addition, the words about the sachet between them were clearly contradictory. Let him go. Shui Ruolin finally spoke, and the two old maids immediately stopped. Qi Hai got on his horse and hid behind Qi Rongji. Since this matter has nothing to do with us, I will take my people and leave. I hope First Miss Qin will not involve my innocent brother in this matter, for the sake of the two mansions meeting and talking in the future. Qi Rongji warned Qin Yuru again, and then left with the servant girl and servant girl. The two ruffians had run far away. The people present were all women, and the sky was dark. No one dared to rush into the depths of the forest to look for Qin Yuru. Shui Ruolin asked someone to help Qin Yuru up, and took them to see old grandma. The people of Ningyuan Army General's mansion also followed them, leaving many onlookers who just came out of the forest in groups of 2s and 3s, whispering to each other. Many people present had heard about what happened in Ningyuan Army General's mansion and Magistrate Qi's mansion in the past, but they did not see it. But this time, they really saw the whole scene. First Miss Qin was sandwiched between two men, and her sleeve was torn. In fact, she had already lost her chastity. A woman's chastity was as important as the sky, and it was in such a public place. If she wanted to protect her chastity, she could either die for her chastity, or she could directly be sent to the Buddhist temple and spend the rest of her life in the secular world. No one knew what this first miss would choose. This was the focus of everyone's discussion. Another topic was that there was something fishy about this matter. This first miss was definitely not chastity, and it was very likely that this first Miss Qin deserved it. Everyone was talking about it at once, and 9 out of 10 words were about doubting Qin Yuru's character. What the hell is going on, Yuru? Why did you go out with them? Old grandma sat in front of the bed, and her face was pale with anger. She patted the bed railing beside her and asked angrily. This was the cause of this matter. Grandma, I really thought something happened to Aunt Shui. I was cheated. Qin Yuru cried loudly and knelt in front of the bed. Why didn't you send someone to ask if something happened to Rulin? Why did you go there yourself? Moreover, Rulin didn't lose any sachet, so how could it be missing? Old grandma did not believe what Qin Yuru said at all. Madame D and Qin Yuru had never liked Shui Rulin, not to mention what had happened before. Even if they did not want something to happen to Shui Rulin, they would not be in a hurry to save her. Grandma, I was really cheated. I panicked at that time. Qin Yuru could only insist that she was cheated now. I can't protect you in this state. You'd better go down the mountain and tell your parents. Seeing that Qin Yuru still did not tell the truth, old grandma was very sad. She leaned back and closed her eyes weakly. She said, I'm old, and you don't take me seriously. What you said, are you going to cheat me again? Fine. Go down the mountain. Old grandma had always done her best for Qin Yuru. She had no other relatives and had always cared about her 2 granddaughters. Qin Yuru was Qin Huayong's flesh and blood, so she would never mistreat her. However, she was really sad at this moment. Madame D and her daughter had been deceiving others like fools again and again. Grandma, you tell father that I was hurt because of Aunt Shui. Qin Yuru cried and begged. I won't say it. If you want to say it, you can say it yourself. Old grandma said angrily. At this time, Qin Yuru still wanted to push the blame to Rulin and create a gap between Huayong and Rulin. Grandma, I'm your biological granddaughter. How could you? Hearing old grandma's refusal, Qin Yuru hurriedly took 2 steps forward and climbed to old grandma's bed. She wanted to grab old grandma's hand. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes. In any case, she wanted to push the cause of this matter to Shui Rulin. She wanted Shui Rulin to be the culprit who hurt her. Qin Wanru stretched out her hand and slapped hard on her hand. She slapped Qin Wanru's hand away and said, Big sister, you keep saying that you want to push the blame to Aunt Shui. How much do you hate Aunt Shui? Old grandma couldn't say it clearly. Qin Wanru was still young, but she could say it insensibly. I must tell father that it was Aunt Shui who saved you, but you kept pushing the blame to Aunt Shui. You even said that it was Aunt Shui's sachet that lured you away. But in fact, it was your sachet. And you let go of the servant of the first young master of the Qi family, who is obviously related to this matter. This servant is very sneaky. I think this matter has something to do with the first young master of the Qi family. Let father talk to Magistrate Qi. Qin Wanru looked angry. In fact, if the 2 ruffians want to find someone, it is not necessarily impossible. Let father call all the families in this village to investigate. We can definitely find out who did this and who they want to deal with. After the investigation is done, let father put an end to that person. The voice of a girl with a little bit of a delicate tone seemed to be very insensible, but every sentence knocked on Qin Yuru's heart. Qin Yuru panicked and trembled. Chapter 65. Qin Yuru was sent to Jingshin Monastery that night. Madame Dowager knew that she could not bear the responsibility for such a thing. Although she was Qin Yuru's grandmother, she was not related to her by blood. Qin Huayong and Madame D had to make the decision. Moreover, she was sad and disappointed with Qin Yuru now, so she did not intend to care about her. Since she did not involve Qin Rulin, she sent her nanny Duan to send Qin Yuru away overnight and explain the situation to Qin Huayong. As for what would happen next, it had nothing to do with her. Since Qin Yuru was sent away, Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru comforted Madame Dowager for a while and helped her to sleep. Because of what happened just now, Madame Dowager coughed badly after lying down and could not control it for a while. Shui Rulin sent someone to invite the master of Jingshin Monastery to come over. After the master of Jingshin Monastery prescribed the medicine again, Shui Rulin asked the servant girl to boil the medicine in the corridor. Shui Rulin sent the master of Jingxin Monastery to the door and turned back after repeatedly thanking her. Seeing Qin Wanru coming out, she stood still and waved to her. "Wanru, come here." After saying that, she turned and walked to the side room, which was remote and no one was there. After Qin Wanru answered, she followed Shui Rulin to the corner. "Wanru, what on earth happened?" After standing still, Shui Rulin frowned and asked. She was not stupid. Connecting the whole thing, she felt it was strange. The sachet was gone, but the sachet at that time was not hers. Then where was her sachet? Except that someone bumped into her, she was only close to Qin Wanru at that time. "Aunt Shui, this is your sachet. Be careful in the future." Qin Wanru showed a trace of smile on her face. She took out a sachet from her arms and handed it to Shui Rulin silently. Shui Rulin was shocked. She hurriedly took the sachet and put it into her sleeve. "Aunt Shui, it was Big Sister who plotted against you. Big Sister deserves it," Qin Wanru said concisely and shockingly. Her words made Shui Rulin silent for a while, and the corners of her eyes turned sour. She looked at Qin Wanru, who was still on her shoulder in front of her. Such a young child knew how to protect her. How could she not feel distressed? She had never been so determined that she would protect this child. She silently reached out to tidy up a strand of hair beside Qin Wanru's ear. For a moment, she had thousands of thoughts. Her eyes reddened, but she didn't know where to start. Qin Wanru didn't go back to her room until Madame Dowager took the medicine and her cough got better. Shui Rulin stayed and ordered Qin Wanru to go back to sleep. After returning to her room, Qin Wanru sat down in front of the dressing table after washing up. "Miss, why do you want to save the first miss?" Qin Yu asked confusedly while wringing out the water stains on her hair. If something really happened to her, Grandma must be responsible, because she followed Grandma up the mountain. Qin Wanru picked up a dry towel and handed it to Qin Yu. Qin Yu changed the wet towel. Nothing could really happen to Qin Yuru, or Madame D would go crazy. A crazy Madame D would do anything, so nothing could happen to Qin Yuru for the time being. But now, does it mean that something happened to the first miss? Qin Yu changed the towel and asked with a half-understanding. Something happened to her, but it was not exposed openly, so she could cover up her face. Madame D must think that she could still be saved. However, so many people saw her messy clothes, and I heard that some of the pilgrims in Jingxin Monastery are the wives and daughters of businessmen who settled here, so they will still leave in the future. Qin Wanru said slowly. "Miss, do you mean that they will spread the news?" Qin Yu's eyes brightened, and suddenly understood. Qin Wanru nodded, touched her hair, and felt that it was almost dry. She said meaningfully, "Jiangzhou is too far from the capital city, we will go back to the capital city eventually." In her previous life, Qin Huaiyong did a good job, and with the background of Duke Yong's mansion, he returned to the capital city soon. Qin Wanru's words were irrelevant, and Qin Yu blinked her eyes. Thinking about the things in her mansion, she actually understood. "Miss, do you mean that Madam and the first miss will ruin your reputation after returning to the capital city?" This guess made Qin Yu's face change, and she stuttered, "But this is obviously the first miss's business. If they must shift the blame to me, with Qi Tianyu's testimony, and Jiangzhou is so far away from the capital city, who will know?" Qin Wanru sneered. The girl in the mirror looked very young, but there was a sense of darkness in her bright eyes. This was not alarmist talk. This was something that really happened to him in his previous life. However, some businessmen would go to the capital city, and some rumors would spread at the right time, or when the rumors spread, someone would say that she happened to be there at that time. Madam and the first miss are so vicious. Qin Yu gasped and said in panic, "Miss, then what should we do?" General and old Grandma will tell the truth, right? Grandma is not in good health, Father. Although Father cares about me, Big Sister is his biological daughter. Qin Wanru's lips slightly curved up with a trace of sarcasm. When he was alone with himself, Qin Huaiyong was indeed very good, and he could not be considered an ungrateful person. However, when it came to his only daughter, he did not think much of it. After all, she was his biological daughter. Sacrificing his own daughter for someone else's daughter, even if Qin Huaiyong felt guilty, he would still watch helplessly. This was something that she had seen very clearly in her previous life. When there was no conflict of interest, Qin Huaiyong would give her fatherly love, but when there was a conflict between her and Qin Yuru, he would finally compromise with Madame D. Then what should we do? Qin Yu was so panicked that she almost dropped the handkerchief in her hand. In the entire general's mansion, Miss was so isolated and helpless, and there was actually no one to protect her. Don't worry, we have Aunt Shui in the future, Qin Wanru said softly to Qin Yu in the mirror. After this battle, even if Shui Rulin still had some hesitation at this time, it should be all gone. In fact, she was the same as Qin Wanru. When Madame D started to plot, there was no way back for her. Qin Wanru was afraid that Shui Rulin could not recognize clearly, so she deliberately took out the sachet just now. Both of them were isolated, Shui Rulin lacked a legitimate identity, and Qin Wanru was too young, so others would not take her words seriously and would only say childish words. Will Miss Shui protect you? Qin Yu subconsciously covered her chest with the handkerchief and said, Yes, Aunt Shui will protect me and Grandma, and I will also protect her and Grandma. Qin Wanru nodded. In her previous life, there were a few weak people who died early, and in this life, they would not be bullied by others. If she was not reborn, she was afraid that in this life, she would still go the same way as in the previous life. A girl who had no ability to protect, in fact, was like the most useless grass in the world. Looking at Miss like this, Qin Yu felt an inexplicable pain in her heart, and sadness surged in her heart. If second Miss was not smart, she might even have lost her life at this time. So, I have to be capable. Qin Wanru's curly long eyelashes fluttered twice, leaving uneven shadows in her eye sockets, revealing a sense of sadness, and her red lips slightly curved, showing a gloomy smile. In the previous life, she who had no ability, floated in the fate, and finally was trampled into the blood sea of purgatory, and died in vain under the knife, without leaving a corpse. In this life, she would not retreat. Qin Yu looked at Qin Wanru, who was sitting in front of the dressing table. She looked at her gorgeous little face, but there was a dignified look like an adult. However, she didn't feel it was strange. She even felt at ease in her heart, as if Qin Wanru could really protect the people around her. The expression on her face slowly calmed down. Feeling Qin Yu's calmness, Qin Wanru slightly raised her head, with a light and gentle smile. Qin Yu was loyal, and she needed her support all the way. She did not want Qin Yu to have doubts and panic because of her. Confidence, she would give Qin Yu confidence and courage. Second Miss, how will first Miss handle this matter? Qin Yu looked at Qin Wanru with a respect that she did not even notice. Although the Miss in front of her was not an adult, in Qin Yu's eyes, there was absolute majesty in her eyes, and she believed in her Miss's ability. We'll go to the capital. Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yu with appreciation, stood up, and touched her hair. Go to the capital? So soon? Didn't you say that the general also did not know when to go to the capital? Qin Yu put down the towel in her hand, pressed Qin Wanru to sit down, and picked up the comb to comb her black hair. It's not father who will go to the capital, it's Qin Yuru who will go to the capital. She can't stay in Jiangzhou anymore. Qin Wanru curled her lips into a sarcastic smile. In her previous life, Qin Yuru did not go to the capital city first. But this life was different. Qin Yuru's reputation in Jiangzhou had been ruined. There was no benefit for her to stay here. It was inevitable that she would be sent to the capital to live in Duke Yong's mansion to avoid trouble. Then what about Madam? Qin Yu asked. She will not leave. Aunt Shui is here and she is worried. Seeing that her hair was combed, Qin Wanru stood up and said softly. If it was not for Shui Rulin, Madame D would have left, but now she had to stay in Jiangzhou. It was a good thing for Qin Wanru to be separated from Qin Yuru. Madame D was different from Qin Yuru. After all, Qin Yuru was just a daughter of an aristocratic family, and her parents were not around. Even if she wanted to say bad things about Qin Wanru, she could only tell a limited number of people, and she had to say it implicitly, or let the servants spread it. Madame D was different. She was Qin Wanru's mother, and she was an elder. Moreover, Duke Yong's mansion was her maiden family, and she knew many people, so she did not need to worry too much about gossiping about Qin Wanru in front of others. If she went to the capital first, she would definitely stir up trouble in the capital and take the initiative, which would not do Qin Wanru any good. Separating Madame D and her daughter was originally the next step of Qin Wanru's plan. Qin Yu left, and Qin Wanru lay on the bed, thinking quietly for a while. Finally, she could not fight against sleepiness, and slowly fell asleep. Chapter 66. Qin Wanru woke up very early. When she opened her eyes in a daze, she felt as if she was pressed by a heavy object, which made her breathless. She must have been pressed to wake up. She subconsciously pushed to the side, trying to push away the thing on her body, but her hands were pressed and she couldn't lift them. Qin Wanru was also anxious. She didn't know whether she was awake or in a dream. She clenched her teeth, pushed hard with her hands, and kicked hard with her feet. Something that bound her seemed to be kicked out and fell heavily under the bed. She felt relaxed. Qin Wanru took a deep breath, and her long eyelashes fluttered twice. When she was about to close her eyes, she suddenly felt something and turned to look under the bed. She saw a pair of cold and bloodthirsty eyes. For a moment, Qin Wanru exclaimed. She also swallowed her saliva. Her bright and beautiful eyes were wide open as she stared at the handsome youth in front of her. He had probably never been in such a sorry state in his entire life. Her beautiful eyes were filled with ruthlessness and disbelief. He fell in front of his bed. Because of the heavy fall, even the crown on his head was crooked, which made the noble Prince Chen look embarrassed. "Pull me up," Chu Luchen said with a cold face after they were stunned for a while. Qin Wanru quickly propped herself up and stretched out one hand. Chu Luchen reached out to hold her little hand and exerted force. Qin Wanru was still ignorant and did everything by instinct. She didn't expect that he exerted so much force that she didn't pull Chu Luchen up. Instead, she pulled herself off the bed and pressed on Chu Luchen with the quilt. Chu Luchen just got up and was pressed again. He was so angry that he almost exploded, and his face became more and more gloomy. Fortunately, Qin Wanru was young and thin, and the quilt was not very heavy. Otherwise, Prince Chen would be pressed to vomit blood. Thinking that he, the dignified Prince Chen, was almost pressed to vomit blood by a woman, Chu Liuchen's eyes were not only cold, but also more hostility. He gritted his teeth and said, "Qin Wanru, Prince, why are you here? This is my room, right?" Qin Wanru really woke up this time. She rolled up and hurriedly reached out to pull Chu Luchen. She rolled her watery eyes and said. This time, she supported herself with one hand on the edge of the bed, and with Chu Liuchen's strength, she pulled Chu Luchen up at once. She looked Prince Chen up and down carefully and felt relieved. Although Prince Chen fell messily, he still had outer clothes on. Thinking of this, she suddenly remembered that she was still wearing her underwear, so she hurriedly carried the quilt to the bed. She hid under the quilt with only her head exposed. She stared at Chu Luchen with her big black and white eyes. "Why are you hiding? If you want to see it, you have already seen it. It's just a child. What's there to see?" With a sullen face, he also sat on the bed, reached out to pull Qin Wanru's quilt, and said naturally, "I'm cold, give me some quilt." Qin Wanru was horrified. "Your Highness, men and women should not sit together when they are 7 years old." Although she was still a child at the age of 11, and it was impossible for her to feel that Chu Luchen had other intentions, she was brought up well. Chu Liuchen's sudden appearance on her bed tested her endurance. Qin Wanru was still a little confused at this time, and she even dared to argue with Chu Luchen. "Oh, I'm not interested in a little bean sprout like you." Chu Luchen sneered, reached out to pull the quilt, pulled most of it over, and covered his body. "If I get cold, will you be responsible?" Seeing the proud prince's pale face and bloodless lips in the moonlight outside the window, Qin Wanru quietly loosened her hands. She couldn't bear this responsibility. Most of the quilt was pulled over and fell on Chu Luchen. Qin Wanru was pitifully sitting alone in the bed, far away from him. She only covered her feet with the quilt, and her whole body curled up into a ball. She was pulled out from the warm quilt, and it was really cold. "Your Highness, you want to see me?" Qin Wanru shivered a little because of the cold, but she didn't dare to grab the quilt. Chu Luchen reached out to pull her little body over, and sneered, "You're such a little girl, and you already said that boys and girls can't be together when they're 7 years old. You're as pedantic and useless as an old pedant." Her small body was pulled over and held in his arms. Chu Luchen felt that she was still like the cat he raised. She was very soft and comfortable, and she looked like the cat when he hugged her to sleep. He reached out and touched her beautiful hair. It felt good, and it was as smooth as silk. Being put into Chu Liuchen's arms, Qin Wanru's body warmed up, but the prince's body didn't seem to warm much, and it seemed to be a little lower than her body temperature. "Your Highness, what do you want to see me for?" Qin Wanru thought it was better not to care about other things with him at this time. Wasn't the prince still in her mansion? Why did he suddenly come to Jingxin Monastery? "I heard that something happened here last night, and I want to see the fun." Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes and said gloomily. Qin Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. "Your Highness, you're late. What happened yesterday is over, and you came because Big Sister was sent back to the mansion, right? It's over long ago." "I don't think it's over yet." Chu Luchen sneered. "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Qin Wanru was stunned, and asked carefully. Her beautiful hair was very black and very long, and because she was sleeping it was loose. At this time, she was sitting, and her whole body was almost covered by her beautiful hair, which made her red lips and white teeth look even more charming, which was different from her age. Especially her dark red lips, coupled with the beautiful shape of her lips, even in the dimly lit room, it seemed to have a natural charm. Chu Liuchen's eyes swept over her cherry lips, and suddenly laughed. "Qin Wanru, I've helped you a lot, and I'm also your savior, right?" "Thank you, Your Highness." Qin Wanru's heart was in her throat. "It doesn't matter whether you thank me or not, but you have to remember that you owe me, and you have to pay it back eventually." Chu Luchen chuckled, leaned back, slightly tilted his head, and looked at Qin Wanru with a bit of naughtiness. "I won't help people for free." "So, Your Highness, what do you mean?" Qin Wanru asked more carefully. "Bring the person in." Chu Liuchen's voice suddenly rose. Someone answered in a low voice outside the window, and a person dressed like a guard pushed open the half-closed window and jumped in, carrying another man in black in his hand. The man in black seemed to be dizzy, and his hand drooped down, as if he couldn't bear the force. "Who's this?" Qin Wanru was shocked, and her body tightened. "Qin Wanru, if it weren't for me, I'm afraid you would have been plotted against." Chu Luchen smiled coldly. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the hands of the man in black, and she also saw the guard put some things on her table, such as a rope, a knife, and an incense. An idea flashed in her mind, and her face changed dramatically. She was still careless. This time, her carelessness almost cost her life, and Madame D was taking drastic measures to take her away. Jingxin Monastery was not like her general's mansion, and there were many people coming and going. Even if something really happened to her, it would be hard to find out. Moreover, Qin Yuru was also in trouble now, and her father also had to deal with her affairs, so she could only put her own affairs aside. When Qin Yuru's affairs were dealt with, she should also be finished. Madame D was so vicious. Feeling the little body in his arms tightened, Chu Luchen reached out to touch her head and smoothed her hair. "So, I saved you again this time." "Thank you, Your Highness." Qin Wanru thanked him sincerely, and her face was as white as snow, without a trace of blood. "The kindness of saving your life is as big as the sky. Qin Wanru, you won't forget it, right?" Chu Liuchen's face softened, as if the person who was cold with hostility just now was not him, and he returned to the appearance of a gentle and handsome young man who walked out of an ink painting. "I will never forget it." Qin Wanru said respectfully again. "Since you didn't forget it, then I will go back, and I am also sleepy." Chu Luchen reached out to point at the man in black on the ground and said. Qin Wanru thought for a moment, "Will he wake up soon?" "It should be a while." Chu Luchen looked at the man in black lying on the ground and said, "Can I trouble you again, Your Highness, to send him to the window in the opposite courtyard? Make it look like he accidentally fell and fainted," Qin Wanru said. There were also people living in the opposite courtyard, and there were many of them. When Qin Wanru went out, she saw a lot of servants surrounding them, so they should also live in a big family. He brought more servants than her, and looking out of the window, it should be dawn soon, and some servants were going to get up. Okay, then I will help you again. Chu Luchan agreed in a good mood. He got off the bed and covered Qin Wanru with the quilt. He tidied up his clothes and asked his guards to clean up the things on the table. Then he jumped out of the window with Qin Wanru in his arms. Qin Wanru sat in her quilt in a daze, and reached out to pull her clothes. Even at this time, her face was as pale as snow. She reached out to pull a corner of the quilt, and only felt that everything around her did not exist. She shivered as if she was immersed in ice water. She was careless and almost lost her life. If something really happened to her, not only she, but also Grandma, Aunt Shui, and Qin Yu would be affected. She slowly clenched her hands, and the quilt in her hands was tightly crumpled into a ball. This kind of thing would not happen again. She took a deep breath, suppressed the fear in her heart, and then slowly exhaled a turbid breath. Pulling the quilt from her head, Qin Wanru got out of the bed, reached out to pick up the clothes on the side, and put them on. She dressed very carefully, and even a crease was flattened. Without the help of a servant girl, she put on her clothes neatly, without a trace of disorder, as if she had got up early. Screams came from the opposite side. Someone was shouting loudly, and someone seemed to break something, making a clear sound. This sound was particularly shocking in this early morning, and many people woke up. Chapter 67. Miss, you got up? Qin Yu rushed in and saw Qin Wanru standing there in tidy clothes, and she was stunned. I couldn't fall asleep on the mountain. Qin Wanru pulled her sleeves and explained, and then changed the topic. What's up? Something happened in the opposite courtyard. It is said that a man sneaked into the window of the opposite womenfolk at night. He is in the courtyard opposite us. I am afraid of you, so I ran in. Qin Yu was relieved when she saw Qin Wanru was fine, and hurriedly reported. Let's go and have a look. Qin Wanru sat in front of the dressing table, and said, just give me a simple one. Qin Yu nodded and went forward, and skillfully made 2 buns for Qin Wanru's hair. She didn't wear any jewelry, but only 2 hair ribbons. When Qin Wanru took Qin Yu to the opposite room, a large group of people were there. Many people were alarmed, and even the nuns of Jingxin Monastery came to maintain the scene. The black-robed man had woken up, and was tied up by 2 rough old maids, and forced to kneel on the ground. The black cloth covering his face had fallen off. When Qin Wanru came in, she saw the familiar face, but she couldn't figure out who it was. Miss, he is from our mansion. Qin Yu was sharper than her, and immediately recognized him, and said loudly. Her voice was not low, and immediately the surrounding noises died down. Everyone looked at Qin Wanru and her servant. Until now, they didn't ask who the black-robed man was, but the things found from him all showed that he had evil intentions. The mountain was full of womenfolk, and it was needless to say that he kidnapped womenfolk to sell them to such a dirty place. The womenfolk hated this kind of people. They were good girls, and if they were sold to such a place, there would be no good ending. The black-robed man had been beaten by many people, but he just clenched his teeth and didn't say anything, and no one could do anything to him. He is from our mansion? Qin Wanru looked surprised, and her eyes fell on the black-robed man, as if she was examining him. He is the coachman of our mansion, the coachman of the carriage that Madam has been using. Qin Yu looked at the black-robed man, and said with certainty. Although the black-robed man had been slapped several times, and his face was swollen, Qin Yu still recognized him at a glance. Madame D's people had always been domineering in the general's mansion, even a coachman. Because this coachman was Madame D's people, he would never drive the carriage for Qin Wanru if she went out. Even when other coachmen were not around, he was unwilling to do so, saying that Madame might need a carriage later. Because of this, Qin Yu was often bullied by him, and so she recognized him very accurately. The coachman's head was buzzing because of the beating. At this time, when he heard the sound of the crowd quieting down, he subconsciously raised his head and met Qin Wanru's dark eyes. He immediately panicked and struggled desperately. The coachman was inexplicably knocked out and caught. When he opened his eyes, he found that he did not know anyone. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In Jiangzhou Prefecture, Madame had a way to save him as long as no one found out that he was Madame's man. Although the coachman did not know why he appeared under the window of a strange woman's family, he was glad that the person who found him was not the second Mississippi. He did not expect that Qin Wanru would appear in front of him, and he panicked. "Are you my mother's woman?" Qin Wanru looked at him coldly. "Are you my mother's woman?" Qin Wanru stared at his face coldly. Being glanced at by her cold eyes, the coachman felt a chill in his heart. He turned his head away and continued to struggle, as if he did not hear Qin Wanru's words. "Are you really my mother's woman? Why did she send you here? Are you here for me?" Qin Wanru continued. "Miss, you have mistaken me for someone else. I don't know what you are talking about, and I don't know which family's madam you are talking about." The coachman knew that he had to speak, and said loudly. He had made up his mind to deny it. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. Needless to say, this coachman was Madame D's henchman. Madame D was desperate when Qin Yuru had an accident, and she came up with this evil plan. She knew that there were no servants around her, and it was not difficult for her, an 11-year-old child, to knock him out and take him away. Looking around, the people present were all confused, but no one spoke again. The scene was strangely quiet. "Miss, I don't know what you're trying to say. I've never seen you before. I just saw that this young lady is so beautiful, that's why." The coachman rolled his eyes and pointed at a young lady who was sobbing on top of a maid beside him. This young lady had just been helped out of the room. Considering the two factors, the coachman was not afraid to go to jail. Madame was very powerful and would let him out. Hearing what he said, the lady sobbed again. A lady in her 30s came over, held her gently, and patted her twice. Her eyes fell on Qin Wanru, and she frowned. An old maid behind her wanted to come forward, but she was stopped by a wave of her hand. But her obscure action was still caught by Qin Wanru's eyes, and she blinked her watery eyes slightly. She had never seen such a dignified madam in Jiangzhou Prefecture, and the servants around her were so well behaved and could order them with just a gesture. This madam was probably not an ordinary person. "Qinyu, slap him." Qin Wanru restrained the surprise in her eyes and said coldly. At this time, the more unusual the situation was, the better it would be for her. Qin Yu's face was already livid with anger, and she rushed over and slapped the coachman hard. "Miss, what does this have to do with you? Aren't you meddling in other people's business?" The coachman was a little angry after being slapped, and he stared at Qin Wanru fiercely. "Lie, you continue to lie. Do you think that even if you are in jail, Mother still has a way to get you out?" Qin Wanru said coldly. She looked at the coachman without avoiding his eyes, and the smile on her lips made the coachman feel colder and colder in his heart. Wasn't this second miss always gentle, innocent, and easy to talk to? "Miss, I really don't know you. You call me madam and drag me to a madam. What are your intentions? It's your business that you don't get along with that madam. Don't drag me into it. I have nothing to do with your business." The coachman was very flustered, but he still struggled to defend loudly. He looked righteous here, as if he was a gentleman rebuking Qin Wanru. If it weren't for the current situation, some people would really believe him. However, when they heard his defense, they only felt more confused, and many people tended to believe Qin Wanru. This person brought so many things and sneaked under someone's window. It was obvious that he was not a good person, but he still flaunted his righteousness here. It was really ridiculous. "Since you don't want to admit it, it doesn't matter. I will ask Grandma to send someone to invite Father to come and let Father recognize it in person." Qin Wanru said sharply, and her small face was tight. Although she was only a little tall, she revealed an indescribable momentum. The 30-year-old madam's eyes fell on Qin Wanru in surprise. Such a small child who was even younger than her daughter could still be calm and self-control in such a situation. Even a miss from an aristocratic family who was raised by a century-old aristocratic family might not be able to maintain this kind of temperament and calmness at this time. The coachman panicked and looked around. If this matter was really brought to the general, he would really have no way to survive. Madame had told him many times, and this was what she said. But he thought of what Madame said. The general was now taking care of the first Mrs. Business, and he had no time to spare even if he could be distracted. He secretly scolded himself for thinking too much, and immediately became much more courageous. "Miss, you can go and invite whoever you want to invite. I'm not afraid of crooked words." The coachman raised his swollen face, and wanted to show that he was not afraid. However, at this time, his appearance was more and more unbelievable. "Qin Yu, ask Grandma to send someone to invite Father. Tell him that Grandma is seriously ill and ask Father to come to Jingshin Monastery immediately." Seeing the coachman was still stubborn, Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and ordered Qin Yu, "Second miss, how dare you lie to the general? This is very unfilial." The coachman panicked and immediately opened his mouth to shout, and when he finished shouting, his face immediately froze. Although the first Mrs. Business was important, if something really happened to old Grandma, the general would definitely come as soon as possible. Old Grandma was old, and no mistakes could be made. But he only worried that the general would appear in Jingshin Monastery, and did not prevent himself from calling out "Second Miss," but he had been calling this Miss before. "Second Miss? Now you know that I am the second Miss, not the first Miss?" Qin Wanru was waiting for this moment. She changed the topic and said with cold eyes. When she said this, everyone understood that this man in black was really an evil servant of the general's mansion. Those who knew Qin Wanru or inferred her identity from Qin Wanru's words immediately figured out the connection before and after. In Jiangzhou Prefecture, only Ningyuan Army General Qin Huaiyong could be called a general. "Second Miss Qin, I have seen you before. I know, you are the second Miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion." The coachman still argued. Qin Wanru did not pay attention to him, and her eyes fell on the window where he was caught, and then looked out along this window. Everyone's eyes also followed her to look out. "Don't tell me you're in the wrong place? You didn't distinguish right from wrong, and mistook this miss for me, and let this miss get into trouble?" Qin Wanru's eyes moved from her own courtyard to the courtyard in front of her. Coincidentally, the two courtyards were facing each other, and both were very simple courtyards. The courtyard wall was not high, because it was impossible for a man to stay overnight, so the wall was not raised. Standing in this courtyard, one could see the house in the opposite courtyard, and also see the window of the opposite house. The two windows were almost facing each other. So it was a mistake? The onlookers began to whisper. Although they suspected the coachman before, they still felt that there was something wrong. How could the coachman of the general's mansion do such a thing, and inexplicably want to hurt a young lady he didn't know? Following Qin Wanru's eyes, they immediately understood. Does the general's wife want to hurt her daughter? She is really cruel. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. Someone sighed. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. You still don't know that the general's wife is not the biological mother of Second Mississippi. Some people still did not know this. This is too evil and wicked. I heard that the general's wife and the first Miss plotted against Second Miss, and almost ruined Second Miss' reputation. This wants to ruin Second Miss again. This woman is really so vicious that it makes people's hair stand on end. Even if she is not the biological daughter, can't she tolerate a child who doesn't even have a biological mother? Chapter 68. Qin Yu, ask Aunt Shui to come here. Don't disturb Grandma. Grandma is not in good health and can't stand such a thing. Qin Wanru lowered her eyebrows and looked very sad. She whispered to Qin Yu. Only her face looked a little meaty, with baby fat on it. She looked small and skinny. When she lowered her head, her long eyelashes drooped down, casting a messy shadow on her pinkish-white face. It was very beautiful, but also very heart-wrenching. And she said very sensibly. She didn't complain to Grandma because she was afraid that Grandma was not in good health and couldn't stand it. She was really a filial and well-behaved girl. How could someone treat such a girl so viciously? It was really intolerable. Everyone stood on Qin Wanru's side. Shui Rulin came quickly, and her forehead was already sweating. When she entered the crowd, she took Qin Wanru up and down and looked her up and down. When she found that Qin Wanru was fine, She breathed a sigh of relief and reached out to hug Qin Wanru. She touched her hair and comforted her. Wanru, it's okay. You will live with Aunt Shui in the future. Aunt Shui will protect you. Being hugged by Shui Ruolin, Qin Wanru's eyes immediately overflowed with tears, but she still didn't cry. In her big black eyes, tears rolled down. The scene of melancholy made the old womenfolk feel sorry for her. It was pitiful to lose her biological mother at such a young age. Now she was set up by her current adoptive mother. It could be said that she was the most miserable one. Aunt Shui, I will stay with you and Grandma from now on. Qin Wanru said in a low voice after biting her lips so hard that the corners of her red lips turned white. She didn't see a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. Since Madame D had sent the evidence to her, how could she let it go? Madame D was sure that her father and Shui Ruolin couldn't get married in a short time and would have many evil plans during this period. Then she would catch her unprepared. She wanted Aunt Shui to enter the general's mansion above board and no one would gossip about her. Wanru will live with Grandma. Grandma and Aunt Shui will protect you. Shui Ruolin was worried and continued to comfort her. She really cared about Qin Wanru. When she heard that Qin Wanru was in trouble, she hurried over. Aunt Shui, please marry my father. For Wanru. Wanru wants to follow you. Qin Wanru raised her head. Her eyes were misty and watery. At this moment, her clear watery eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist, which made her look both aggrieved and pitiful. However, the meaning behind these words made everyone's heart skip a beat. There was obviously something hidden behind these words. Shui Ruolin didn't expect that Qin Wanru would talk about this at this time. Her face stiffened. But when she saw Qin Wanru's expectant eyes, she reached out to touch her head again and didn't know how to answer for a while. Qin Wanru gently pushed Shui Ruolin away and knelt down with its plop sound. She reached out to pull the hem of Shui Ruolin's skirt and looked at Shui Ruolin with a pair of big sad eyes. Aunt Shui, my mother has schemed against you and my father. If you really become a monk, what should Wanru and my grandmother do? I beg Aunt Shui to marry father. With just one sentence, everyone present was stunned. One by one, they looked at each other. The amount of information in this sentence was so great that everyone was so shocked that they couldn't recover for a long time. General's wife not only schemed against second Miss who was not her biological daughter, but also schemed against Miss Shui who lived in General's mansion? If this was said by others, people would not believe it. But now Qin Wanru just escaped from the tiger's mouth. Because of her young age, it was reasonable for her to say such words in a panic. Everyone consciously came up with such an idea. She was frightened by the black-robed man. Even if she pretended to be strong in front of others, she was still a young child. When she saw an elder who was good to her, she immediately found someone to rely on and blurted out some words. Shui Ruolin's face blushed and she was too shy. She reached out to pull Qin Wanru up and scolded her in a low voice. You are a child. Why did you say this? Aunt Shui, you promised to protect me. Although Qin Wanru was pulled up, she still stared at Shui Ruolin with childish persistence in her eyes. Shui Ruolin didn't know how to answer the meaning of this sentence. Of course, it was not just to protect Qin Wanru. She didn't have a legitimate title in General's mansion, so she couldn't really protect Qin Wanru. Aunt Shui, I am going to talk to father. I will ask him to agree. Qin Wanru wiped her tears and no longer embarrassed Shui Ruolin. But her tone was still very firm. Aunt Shui, please ask someone to bring this coachman to father. Okay, I will ask someone to take him down the mountain and punish him for your father. As long as Qin Wanru didn't say anything that made Shui Ruolin too ashamed to raise her head, Shui Ruolin would agree to anything now. Although she also felt a little bit of Qin Wanru's meaning at this time, she really couldn't bring herself to do it. Aunt Shui, can you guarantee that when this person is sent down the mountain he will not be taken away by mother's people? Qin Wanru was not assured and reached out to shake her sleeves. Shui Ruolin hesitated. She couldn't guarantee that Madame D was not a stupid person. She should have a backup plan. Then, what should we do? Qin Wanru said helplessly and reached out to pull Shui Ruolin's sleeves. The two girls, one big and one small, looked very lonely and helpless at this time. They couldn't even deal with a servant. It could be seen that they were in a difficult situation in General's mansion. One was too young, and the other was not a legitimate title. Everyone present couldn't help sighing in their hearts and felt sorry for them. The coachman who was kneeling on the ground also heard their faces and couldn't help showing a little bit of complacency on his face. Madam would definitely arrange someone at the foot of the mountain to save him. At that time, there would be no evidence, and whatever second miss said would be false. I will ask someone to take him to Ningyuan Army General. Suddenly someone in the crowd said. Everyone looked back and found that it was the madam in her 30s. She was also the temporary owner of this yard. Qin Wanru reached out and gently pushed Shui Rulin. Shui Rulin immediately bowed sideways respectfully and said, "May I know who you are, madam? My husband's surname is Luo, and my maiden family's surname is Xian. You have to call me Madam Xian. Speaking of this, my daughter almost got into trouble. Since this person is the coachman of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, we must ask Ningyuan Army General to give us an explanation. Come on, take him to Ningyuan Army General's mansion and show my name card. If anyone wants to take him away on the way, beat them directly." Thinking that her daughter almost got into trouble, Madame Xian's face was very bad and she ordered in a stern voice. "Yes, madam." An old maid walked out of the crowd and bowed to Madame Xian. Then she waved to two rough old maids. The two old maids answered and pulled the coachman up. Another 4 rough old maids came to protect them. Seeing this situation, the coachman panicked. "Hey, Jiangzhou is a place with laws. What do you want to?" Before he finished his words, an old maid came over and stuffed a handkerchief in his mouth. The 2 old maids who pulled him together exerted their strength and immediately pulled the rough man down. The crowd moved skillfully. At first glance, it could be seen that they were not people who could be accompanied by ordinary families. Qin Wanru raised her head and her complicated eyes fell on the madam. She knew who the madam in front of her was. In her previous life she had never seen her, but she had heard of this young madam. The surname Xen was rare. In her previous life, Qin Wanru only knew that young madam of Duke Yangxu's young madam whose maiden family was Xen and her husband's surname was Luo. The maiden family of this young madam was a military family. It was said that her behavior was more forthright than that of ordinary madams. The reason why Qin Wanru remembered her so clearly was that she was the daughter of this young madam. Her eyes involuntarily fell on the miss who was still sobbing over there. This should be Madame Xian's daughter, Luo Xiaowan. Madame Xian herself was a strong person, but she gave birth to a weak daughter. This Miss Luo was gentle by nature, and she also married a cunning husband. She was tortured to the point that she was out of shape, but she dared not tell her mother. Later, this Madame Xian saw some doubts and asked someone to investigate. She was so angry that she brought people to make a scene in Luo Xiaowan's husband's house. She slapped Luo Xiaowan's husband severely and forced him to sign the divorce agreement on the spot. She returned to Duke Yangxu's mansion with her daughter and dowry overnight. This matter was controversial at that time. Some people said that Madame Xian was overbearing and rude, and others said that Madame Xian loved her daughter so much, so it was reasonable. The whole capital city was in an uproar because of this matter. Some people even submitted memorials to impeach Duke Yangxu, and even Madame Xian was summoned to the Empress's palace for questioning. This matter was settled later, but because it was so noisy, even Qin Wanru, who was in the boudoir, heard many rumors about this Madame Xian. Now this should be her. Unexpectedly, she met Madame Xian in Jiangzhou. With the help of this decisive and straightforward Madame Xian, Madame D could not escape this time even if she wanted to. "Thank you, Madame Xian." Although Shui Rulin did not know who this Madame Xian in front of her was, she was not stupid and could also see that this Madame Xian was extraordinary. Seeing that she took the initiative to take care of this matter, Shui Rulin was relieved. If no one could help her deal with this matter, she could only turn to Nanny Duan, who was serving Grandma. She had the same idea as Qin Wanru. It was better not to let Madame Dowager know it. Madame Dowager was in poor health and could not bear too many things. If Nanny Duan knew it, Madame Dowager also knew it. The coachman was taken out. The rest of the people saw that there was nothing else to do and also left. Shui Rulin took Qin Wanru's hand and was about to leave, but was stopped by Madame Xing. "Miss Shui, please take care. Can you come in and talk?" Shui Rulin was very grateful to Madame Xing. Hearing what she said, she nodded at once, let go of Qin Wanru's hand and said, "Wanru, then you go back first. I will talk with Madame Xing. Second Miss Qin, don't go first. Can second Miss Qin talk with Xiaowan?" Madame Xing's eyes fell on Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was small, younger than her daughter, but the scene just now made Madame Xing admire her very much. This child was very likable, and she had a temperament that was different from ordinary people. She originally wanted to cultivate this kind of temperament from her own daughter, but her daughter's temperament was too gentle, which made Mrs. Xing sigh. Chapter 69. At such a young age, this child had an extraordinary bearing, which was really likable. Xiaowan, accompany second Miss Qin to the side to talk. Mother and Miss Shui have something to talk about. Madame Xing turned back and gently told her daughter. Luo Xiaowan bit her lip, raised her head, and carefully glanced at Qin Wanru. Her eyes were still slightly red, and it could be seen that she was crying just now. Seeing Qin Wanru, who was much younger than her, looking at her with big black eyes, she couldn't help but show a little shyness on her face. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, walked over and said, "Second Miss Qin, please come with me." In fact, she was very embarrassed. After crying, she had to entertain a guest, and it was a miss who was much younger than her. She also saw the scene just now. Thinking that she was older than her, she only knew how to cry when something happened, but second Miss Qin, who was younger than her, could deal with it calmly, which made her admire her very much. While admiring her, she felt more and more embarrassed. She stirred the handkerchief a few times, took Qin Wanru to the wing room on the side, and asked people to serve tea and snacks for Qin Wanru. Because of Qin Wanru's calm response, she felt that she didn't seem to be so panicked and afraid. "How old are you?" They sat down at the table. Luo Xiaowan looked her up and down and asked curiously in a low voice. "Miss Luo, I am 11 years old." Qin Wanru blinked and replied. Inexplicably, she also had a good impression of this gentle Miss Luo. It could be seen that Luo Xiaowan's gentleness was really gentle, not like the gentleness that Madame D and Qin Yuru pretended to be. "You are 11 years old. You look a little young. I thought you were at most 10 years old." Luo Xiaowan also calmed down at this time, covered her lips with a handkerchief, and chuckled. Qin Wanru's slim body was indeed much smaller than her peers. Fortunately, when she grew up, although she was not tall, she still had the basic height. "Miss Luo, how old are you?" Qin Wanru smiled slightly and also became curious. "I am 13 years old." Luo Xiaowan twisted the handkerchief again and was quite embarrassed. "I am so old, but I can't compare with you. I was actually scared to cry." These words were very straightforward. Although Luo Xiaowan's face was red and she felt embarrassed, she was a straightforward person. "Miss Luo has the protection of Mrs. Xing. Mrs. Xing will help you. Moreover, you have never encountered such a thing in the future. In fact, if this person ran to my window, I would be so scared that I would cry." Seeing Luo Xiaowan's embarrassment, Qin Wanru said with a smile. The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. The friendship between girls was sometimes very simple. With a single sentence and a single action, they could be considered to have hit it off. Luo Xiaowan was not so reserved at this time. Thinking that she was older, she was not so embarrassed. "My name is Xiaowan. You can call me Sister Xiaowan. What's your name?" "Sister Xiaowan, my name is Wanru." Qin Wanru said straightforwardly. She also had a good impression of this sincere and gentle Luo Xiaowan. "Then I'll call you Sister Wanru. Look, we both have the word Wan in our names." "We are really fated," Luo Xiaowan said with a smile. "It is indeed fated." Qin Wanru also smiled. The two people who had never seen each other in the last life actually met in Jiangzhou in this life. It was really fated. It could be seen that her rebirth had changed a lot of things. This also made Qin Wanru more confident about her future encounters. She would definitely be able to reverse the final outcome. Sister Wanru, is the general's wife not your biological mother? Then who is your biological mother? Luo Xiaowan thought of what everyone had just said and asked in surprise. Qin Wanru lowered her head and shook it silently. She didn't know this until she died in the last life. I don't know. How can you not know? Is it possible that your biological mother is not a member of the general's mansion? Luo Xiaowan asked in surprise and felt very surprised. She had thought that Qin Wanru's biological mother was a concubine of the general's mansion. The general recorded her as the legal wife in order to improve her status and make her a legal daughter. My biological mother is not in the general's mansion. Qin Wanru shook her head again. Could it be the former concubine of Ningyuan army general, but now she has died? Luo Xiaowan knew that she had touched Qin Wanru's sore spot. In order to remedy it, she hurriedly said. But in fact, these words were more and more hurtful. An old maid behind her pulled her sleeve helplessly, hinting that what she said was wrong. This was the old maid's supervisor arranged by Mrs. Exon for her. Mrs. Exon was worried that her daughter would do bad things with good intentions. Sister Wanru, I don't mean anything else. I just think it's strange that you don't have a biological mother. Sister Wanru, don't be angry. After Luo Xiaowan finished speaking, she actually felt that she had said something wrong. She reached out and pulled Qin Wanru's sleeve. Sister Xiaowan, I'm fine. I just can't find my biological mother. My biological mother is not in the general's mansion, and no concubine has died. Qin Wanru raised her head and shook her head bitterly. Qin Huaiyong did not have many concubines, so it was easy to find them. Sister Wanru, don't be sad. Maybe you will know who your mother is in a few days. Luo Xiaowan comforted her. And even if you don't have a biological mother, it doesn't matter. You still have father, grandmother, and your Aunt Shui. Luo Xiaowan also saw the scene of Shui Ruolin protecting Qin Wanru. Well, I still have grandmother, Aunt Shui, and father. Qin Wanru nodded. Her thick and curly eyelashes fluttered twice, covering the deepness in her eyes. In this life, she would not be muddle-headed anymore. The thing about her biological mother should be related to the seal in her hand. She guessed that she was not Qin Huaiyong's biological daughter. This was the answer she had deduced from many clues in her previous life. Wanru, let's go back. Shui Ruolin's voice suddenly came from the door. Qin Wanru stood up. Sister Wanru, I will return to the capital city in a few days. If you return to the capital city in the future, come to play with me. Luo Xiaowan stood up reluctantly. Okay, after I return to the capital city, I will definitely play with you, Sister Xiaowan. Qin Wanru smiled and nodded hard. Seeing that she agreed to her words so seriously, Luo Xiaowan was also happy. She reached out and touched Qin Wanru's head like an adult. Then don't forget. I won't forget. Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes with a smile. Looking at the two of them, Madame Exon could not help but laugh. Her daughter had always been gentle and weak. After this happened, she would not recover without being sad for a few days. But now her eyes were sparkling. It seemed that the sadness in her heart had been eliminated, which was an excellent thing. She inquired about Shui Ruolin before because she was indignant that Madame D's people almost hurt her daughter. She wanted to intervene. Now she really wanted to stand up for Qin Wanru. Coincidentally, she was the victim, which was justifiable. Coming out of Madame Xion's yard, Qin Wanru followed Shui Ruolin to Madame Dowager's yard. Madame Dowager was not in good health and had not gotten up these days. Even though she was better now, Madame Dowager did not dare to let her be exposed to the wind. She only helped her to the corridor in the middle of the day to relax and bask in the sun. After the two accompanied Madame Dowager in the room for a while, Qin Wanru asked Shui Ruolin to go to rest. Shui Ruolin did not have a good rest yesterday. Shui Ruolin did not want to leave at first, but Madame Dowager and Qin Wanru asked her to go back together. She was really tired. Seeing that there was nothing to do, she agreed to go back and sleep first. She thought that she would keep watch for Madame Dowager at night. Zhuozhua, did something happen? After Shui Ruolin left, the smile on Madame Dowager's face slowly faded. Don't tell Grandma that nothing happened. When your Aunt Shui left in a hurry just now, She walked so fast. I knew something happened at first glance. Madame Dowager said in a low voice. Hearing this, Qin Wanru knew that Shui Ruolin had just exposed herself. She helplessly reached out to shake Madame Dowager's hand and said in a spoiled manner, "Grandma, the coachman of our mansion brought some bad things like hidden incense and ropes. He climbed to the window of Miss in the opposite yard and wanted to plot against her. But he was discovered." Originally, she wanted to talk about this matter after the matter was settled. At that time, Grandma would not be anxious if she knew it. Madame D is such a vicious woman. Madame Dowager understood it as soon as she heard it. She was so angry that she trembled all over. What plot against Qin Wanru? The coachman obviously wanted to plot against Qin Wanru, but he got the wrong house. Thinking that Qin Wanru was almost kidnapped by Madame D, Madame Dowager felt guilty and sad. She reached out to hold Qin Wanru in her arms and felt so distressed that her tears were about to fall. "Grandma, father may come later. The person living opposite me is a noble lady in the capital city. This matter is serious." Qin Wanru patted Madame Dowager's back to comfort her. Seeing such a young granddaughter trying to comfort her like an adult, Madame Dowager felt sad. This child had always been sensible, but Madame D was prejudiced. Now she even came up with such a vicious method, which was obviously to ruin Zhuozhua. She would not agree. Even if she died, she would protect this child. "Grandma, don't worry. Father will definitely marry Aunt Shui this time, and both Aunt Shui's and father's reputation will not be ruined. I just begged Aunt Shui to protect me in front of that madam, and also said that mother plotted against Aunt Shui and father." Qin Wanru leaned her head on Madame Dowager's arms and rubbed against her like a spoiled child. Just by rubbing against her, Madame Dowager's whole heart softened. This child was so lovable. It's all because of Grandma's uselessness. If Grandma had not been sick, I would have made a decision for Zhuozhua and Ruolin. Madame Dowager was sad and sad. For a moment, she was so sad that she could not help coughing violently. Qin Wanru hurriedly got out of Madame Dowager's arms and reached out to gently pat her back to help her recover. "Grandma, don't be sad. This time, you must make a decision for Aunt Shui. In the future, Aunt Shui can make a decision for Zhuozhua and protect her." Qin Wanru patted Madame Dowager's back and comforted her. She knew what to say to make Grandma more determined. In the past, because too many things had happened in General's mansion, Madame Dowager was afraid that it would affect Qin Huaiyong's career, so she temporarily put this matter on hold. But now that there was a legitimate reason, coupled with what had just happened, Aunt Shui's right to enter the General's mansion was bound to happen. "Zhuozhua, don't worry, Grandma will make a decision for your Aunt Shui this time." Madame Dowager finally recovered and held Qin Wanru's hand. There was a trace of determination on her face. Even a child could see through it. How could she not see through it? Chapter 70. Qin Huaiyong came quickly and went up the mountain before noon. He came to see old Grandma first, and old Grandma sent everyone out of the room. Nanny Duan knew that the mother and son had something to say, so she deliberately waited outside the door. "Huaiyong, what are you going to do about it?" Old Grandma sat on the bed and asked with a gloomy face. "Mother, I can't divorce Madame D now." There were only the mother and son in the room, so Qin Huaiyong didn't need to hide something. He said with a wry smile, "Duke Yong's mansion was benevolent and righteous at that time. Even though I was not prominent at that time, they still married their daughter. I can't be ungrateful." Qin Huaiyong said with a tired look. "I won't force you to do this." Before Qin Huaiyong came, Madame Dowager had made it clear that it was impossible to divorce Madame D at this time. Not to mention that Duke Yong's mansion had always flaunted the idea of Madame D marrying a man of a lower status. It was impossible for such a thing to happen when Qin Huaiyong was transferred back to the capital city. Ningyuan Army General's mansion was one of the best in Jiangzhou, but it was nothing in the capital city. Moreover, there was still Qin Yuru. With Qin Huaiyong's temperament, it was impossible for him to abandon his only daughter. "Marry Ruolin and let her be your legal wife. Ruolin will take care of Zhuozhua in the future. Madame D and Ruolin will be in charge of the backyard together. I'm old and useless, so I can't take care of the backyard for you anymore. Old grandma sighed and leaned back with a gloomy look. Mother, I'll do as you say. You will recover. Seeing old grandma's look, Qin Huaiyong felt a pain in his heart and was very sad. It won't take long for the whole Jiangzhou prefecture to know that Madame D framed up Zhuozhuo today. They will also know that Madame D framed up Rulin. They will also know that you married Rulin at this time to give Rulin an explanation. On the other hand, Zhuozhuo will have no mother to take care of her. From now on, Zhuozhuo will be raised by Rulin. With what happened today, no one will gossip about you in the officialdom. Old grandma continued. Originally, I thought that this was not the time for Rulin to enter the door, but now, I have no choice but to do so. What she said was very logical, and every word was said with consideration for Qin Huaiyong. Qin Huaiyong suddenly felt ashamed. He was indeed grateful for what had happened in the past, but there were some things that he did have selfish motives for. Madame Dowager didn't expose him, but she kept thinking for his sake. How could she not feel ashamed? Mother, there shouldn't be any problem with Madame D, right? Old grandma shook her hand and sighed lightly. She looked at Qin Huaiyong and asked gently. Qin Huaiyong sneered angrily. How dare she say such a thing? She even wanted to kidnap Wanru. Wanru is such a well-behaved child, and we have raised her for so many years. How could she do it? Qin Huaiyong sneered angrily. Seeing the coachman was sent to him, and then seeing Madame D hurrying over with a flustered look, Qin Huaiyong immediately understood and immediately ordered someone to interrogate the coachman. He was a general, and the army had a set of torture methods to deal with spies. The coachman couldn't stand it and told everything. He gave Madame D 2 hard slaps on the face at that time, and then brought his men to Jingxin Monastery. At this time, as long as he didn't divorce Madame D, she had no right to say anything. Even if Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city knew it, they had no reason to interfere in this matter. Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion were in the hands of this matter. Since this matter has been decided, you go back to the mansion to prepare. I will go down the mountain 5 days later and arrange this marriage for you. Let Madame D do a good job in the mansion. Madame Dowager nodded, thought for a while and said, I have a manor at the foot of the mountain in Jingxin Monastery. Let Rulin live there first, and you can go there to escort the bride. That manor was actually not very close to Ningyuan Army General's mansion. To escort the bride from here, at least half of Jiangzhou City had to go around Jingxin Monastery. This was also Madame Dowager's intention to make face for Shui Rulin, and also to let more people know that this marriage was legitimate, so that there wouldn't be more gossip about this marriage in the future. I understand. Qin Huaiyong agreed one by one. What about Yuru? There were a lot of womenfolk present at that time, and then there will be more rumors. Madame Dowager sighed. After all, Qin Yuru was her granddaughter, and she was actually worried about her. Let Yuru go to the capital city and temporarily live in Duke Yong's mansion. Jiangzhou, she can't stay here any longer. Her marriage can wait until I go to the capital city. Qin Huaiyong had a headache and pressed his temples. He was increasingly dissatisfied with Madame D. If Madame D didn't teach her well, how could such a thing happen? His good daughter was almost ruined, and her reputation in Jiangzhou was ruined. He hoped that when she went to the capital city in the future, no one would mention this matter again. Since the heir of Duke Yong wanted to marry Qin Yuru, then this matter should be settled. Therefore, this time Qin Yuru went to the capital city with the reason of going to the capital city to get engaged. That's the only way. Madame Dowager nodded, and then asked with concern, how about your transfer order? Mother, don't worry. There is some progress. Someone from Duke Yong's mansion came to talk about this matter, and there is also news from other sources. Qin Huaiyong said vaguely. In fact, there was news about the mysterious Prince Chen who came to Jiangzhou, but this was a secret. Even in front of Madame Dowager, Qin Huaiyong didn't dare to say more. But he believed that even if he didn't say it, Madame Dowager could guess a little. Mother, today Madame D's people made a mistake. Where is the madam in the courtyard now? Such a thing happened in Jiangzhou. I will go to meet that madam. After Madame Dowager's matter was settled, Qin Huaiyong stood up. The reason why he came in a hurry was also an important reason. Is she from a powerful background? Madame Dowager frowned and asked in a low voice. The daughter of Duke Yongsu's young madam and Duke Yongsu's young madam in the capital city. Qin Huaiyong rubbed between his eyebrows. This matter was actually not easy to deal with. Since he saw the name card of Duke Yongsu's young madam, Qin Huaiyong knew that he had to give an explanation for this matter. It's actually Duke Yongsu's young madam. Madame Dowager was shocked, and her face changed slightly. In the military, Duke Yongsu's young madam's maiden family was considered a powerful one. What a coincidence! What is she doing in Jiangzhou instead of the capital city? I don't know. Maybe she is visiting relatives. Qin Huaiyong said. Then you go first, Madame Dowager said. Madame Dowager said. After thinking for a while, she reminded Qin Huaiyong, who was about to go out, this Duke Yongsu's young madam seems to like Zhuozhuo very much. Thank you, mother. I know what to do. Qin Huaiyong's feet paused on the threshold for a moment, then he nodded and said. Coming out of Madame Dowager's yard, Nanny Duan personally led Qin Huaiyong to the yard of Duke Yongsu's young madam. After the servant reported, Qin Huaiyong was invited into the house. After the two greeted each other, they went to the house separately. General Qin, how should we deal with this matter? Madame Xen was a straightforward person. She didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Madam, this matter is also considered as my family's matter. Fortunately, you and your daughter are in danger. Otherwise, I can't absolve myself from the guilt. Qin Huaiyong stood up and saluted again with his hands folded. I will give you a generous gift to apologize later. General is too polite. It doesn't matter whether the gift is polite or not. It's just that the young daughter of General's mansion is innocent. It's really pitiful. Madame Xen had already guessed what Qin Huaiyong would do. She picked up the teacup and took a sip, then said with a faint smile. Qin Huaiyong was silent for a while. After sitting down again, he asked, Madam, what do you mean? I don't mean much. After all, she is just an outsider. But as a mother whose daughter was almost killed, I really can't see this child being so pitiful. Find her a mother who loves her. Madame Xen turned her eyes to Qin Huaiyong with a bit of fierceness. Qin Huaiyong's face darkened. Madame Xen, are you going to interfere in my family's affairs? Madame Dowager said this matter sincerely for him. But Madame Xen was an outsider. Moreover, under such circumstances, she had the intention of forcing him to marry. General Qin, do you think I am forcing you to marry? Madame Xen smiled. What do you mean, madam? Qin Huaiyong asked. Of course, I feel that the young girl is pitiful. But your cousin is also pitiful. She has been a widow for a long time, but she is also plotted against. If no one helps her, she will be a concubine at most, and a concubine who remarries. How many people will value her? This time was enough for Madame Xen to inquire about Shui Rulin. The cousin is pitiful and the young girl is pitiful. In this case, why don't you give her a way out? It is also a good thing. I think Miss Shui and second Miss Qin are both good people. If the general takes pity on them, you will be rewarded in the future. After saying this, Qin Huaiyong was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed, stood up and bowed to Madame Xen. I thank you on behalf of them. No need to thank me. I just saw an injustice on the road. Madame Xen also stood up and bowed to him politely. Now everyone had a tacit understanding about this matter. Although Madame Xen was straightforward, she was a woman after all. Qin Huaiyong couldn't stay for long. After saying goodbye, he went to Qin Wanru's yard opposite. Qin Wanru had already been waiting in the yard. Seeing Qin Huaiyong striding over, she hurriedly stepped forward to salute. Qin Huaiyong waved his hand and strode into the house. Qin Wanru followed in and wanted to salute again, but she was stopped by him. Wanru, speaking of this matter, your mother was also deceived. The coachman found an excuse to make trouble and made such a thing? Qin Huaiyong frowned. He wanted to whitewash everything, but he couldn't go on when he saw his little daughter's black eyes. Qin Wanru's eyes were so pure that they could almost reflect people's hearts. Qin Huaiyong couldn't make up those false words for a while. Originally, he thought that his little daughter was still young. As long as he said some appropriate words, he could hide this matter and maintain the superficial peace. But when he saw his little daughter's clear eyes reflecting his figure, he felt more guilty. Although Qin Wanru was young, she was a smart child. Chapter 71. Thank you, Father. Hearing Qin Huayong's words, Qin Wanru bowed to him. Her watery eyes were curved, and she smiled like a flower. It could be seen that she was very happy. This child was really kind. He didn't mention anything that would make her feel awkward, but he still smiled so sincerely. In the future, Wanru would be raised by Rulin. Qin Huayong knew Rulin's character, and she would never mistreat Wanru. Qin Huayong didn't stay on the mountain for long. After comforting Qin Wanru, he went down the mountain. Madame Xin and Luo Shaoan also left after lunch that day. Qin Wanru sent them to the foot of the mountain. Luo Shaoan and Qin Wanru whispered a lot before reluctantly leaving with Madame Xin. Miss, let's go back. Qin Yu looked at the forest behind the mountain and reminded Qin Wanru. Last night, something happened to Qin Yuru here. Although it was daytime, Qin Yu still felt scared. Nothing will happen here. Qin Wanru shook her head. Mrs. Xin and others went down from the back mountain. She looked around and pointed to a path. Let's go further. Miss, where does this path lead to? Qin Yu looked at the path on the right and said uneasily. She was not familiar with this place, and she was afraid that there would be an accident. She was now very vigilant because of Madame D. I don't know. Let's go and see. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on a few orchids on the side of the path. There were only 2 or 3 of them, and they weren't even exquisite ones. They were just the most ordinary kind, as if they were randomly growing on the roadside. They had small yellow flowers, and they weren't big, but they were very exquisite upon closer inspection. The gravel path, coupled with these few clusters of orchids, was not eye-catching, but inexplicably exquisite. There was a gravel path in front of Qin Wanru's feet, which was where Madame Xin and Luo Shaoan went down. It was a path to the foot of the mountain. Where did this path lead to? It was almost impossible that 2 similar paths led to the foot of the mountain. Moreover, both paths were paved with gravel, so Jingxin Monastery would not do something superfluous. Let's go and have a look. Qin Wanru thought of something and turned around. Miss, let's not go. Qin Yu was very worried. Although she was walking behind Qin Wanru, she was still worried. I'm fine. Qin Wanru shook her head, stood still, looked around, and then walked again. She suddenly had a guess in her mind, but she didn't know whether it was true or not. She would go to find out now. Seeing that she insisted, Qin Yu could only follow behind her and walk in carefully. After a few steps, there was a bend. There were also a few orchids by the side of the road. They were blooming with small flowers and had an enchanting posture. Although they were ordinary, they exuded the elegance of autumn. The path took a few more turns, sometimes going up and sometimes going down. When Qin Wanru stood still and took a rest, she looked back and found that the path was generally going up. From a distance, she could see a flat grassland in front of her. There were 3 thatched cottages built on the grassland, and a few tall bamboos stood behind the cottages. Unlike ordinary green bamboos, it was actually purple bamboos. His lips curled into a smile. It seemed like he had really found it. As she walked closer, she found that the cottage was closed, the door was locked, and the window was closed tightly. Turning to the back of the cottage, she saw a few purple bamboos, a cluster of orchids, and a very quiet place. Looking up, it seemed to be a little bit below the side of the peak of Jingxin Monastery, but not the back of Jingxin Monastery. From this position, she could see several Buddhist halls on the top of Jingxin Monastery. The incense smoke was curling up, and the sound of Zen was deep and distant, but she would not be disturbed by other people. It was a good place to meditate and practice Zen. Miss, there is no one here. After Qin Yu walked around the house for 3 times, she found nothing. It should be an abandoned house, and it seems that no one has lived in it for a long time. Someone lives in it. Qin Wanru shook her head, and her eyes fell on a bamboo hat hanging outside the door. The bamboo hat was not big, and it was still wet, and had not dried. Looking at the autumn sun in the middle of the sky, under this kind of sun, if it was not kept for a long time, the water on the bamboo hat should have dried long ago. Following Qin Wanru's eyes, Qin Yu also saw the wet bamboo hat and couldn't help but touch it, and her face was full of surprise. "Miss, it is really wet. Who lives in it? Who would choose to live here instead of in Jingxin Monastery? Is it a male pilgrim?" Qin Wanru shook her head. Jingxin Monastery never allowed male pilgrims to live in the monastery. Even her father could not break this rule, and everyone in Jiangzhou knew it. If it was really possible to let male pilgrims live here, and it was on such an easy way to find, it was impossible that there were no rumors. Female pilgrims have a place to live on the top, but male pilgrims are not allowed to live here. Besides male and female pilgrims, who else would live here? Qin Yu said confusedly and raised her head to look around. "Miss, this place is really good to live in. It is very quiet, and the scenery is good. You can see the monastery on the mountain and enjoy the scenery around." Qin Wanru slightly raised her lips. Must it be a pilgrim? If not a pilgrim, who would live on the mountain? Qin Yu said subconsciously. Qin Wanru smiled and pointed to the top of her head, but didn't say anything and tilted her head, looking at the hut and thinking. Qin Yu also looked up, following Qin Wanru's finger, and there was nothing on the top except the sky and the Buddha hall. "Miss, there is only a monastery on the top. Are they nuns in the monastery?" Qin Yu didn't see anything and subconsciously curled her lips and suddenly jumped up in surprise. "Ah, miss, they are nuns in Jingxin Monastery, right?" Qin Wanru walked around the house, and there was nothing around, so she focused on the empty grassland, walked a few steps, squatted down, and focused on a few clovers that looked the same. The clovers had 3 leaves and looked very ordinary. If Qin Wanru didn't read medical books, she would think so, but now she could see that these clovers were herbs. She looked up at other places around, and it was not a grassland, but a grass garden with many herbs planted in between. She slightly raised her eyes, and the smile on her face became more obvious. "Let's go back first." Qin Wanru stood up and looked at the front of the hut and said after a few more glances, "Yes, miss." Qin Yu looked at Qin Wanru eagerly. Miss seemed to have a well-thought-out plan, but she didn't know anything. The path that they took out seemed to be faster than before. Qin Wanru walked on the path into the woods, and after the woods, they would arrive at Jingxin Monastery. After finding the position, Qin Wanru saw the Buddha hall in the hut below, and the meditation room of the master of Jingxin Monastery beside the Buddha hall. The meditation room of the master of Jingxin Monastery was not in the center of Jingxin Monastery, but in a remote place. Standing outside the meditation room of the master of Jingxin Monastery, Qin Wanru hesitated, but still walked in. Seeing Qin Wanru coming, the nun guarding the door bowed to her, and then went into the room to report to the master of Jingxin Monastery. After a while, the nun came out. "Second Miss Qin, our master wants to see you." Qin Wanru smiled politely, asked Qin Yu to stay at the door, and walked into the room alone. In the meditation room, the fragrance was curling up from the incense burner on the table. The fragrance of the Buddhist incense was different from other incense, and it had a feeling of calming the mind. Just stepping in, she already felt much more refreshed. The master of Jingxin Monastery knelt in front of her rush cushion, and it seemed that she was not surprised that Qin Wanru would appear at this time. "Master, can I ask about Mingqiu Nun?" Qin Wanru went forward and knelt down in front of another rush cushion, bowed to the master, and asked. "Junior sister is not in the monastery." The master of Jingxin Monastery smiled gently. "Master, can I ask if Mingqiu Nun is still in Jiangzhou?" Qin Wanru asked. "Maybe she is or maybe not. After junior sister left Jingxin Monastery, she might not tell me her whereabouts." The master of Jingxin Monastery smiled slightly, and her eyes fell on Qin Wanru, which seemed to have a deep meaning. "Master of Jingxin Monastery, do you think I can find Mingqiu Nun?" Qin Wanru changed her way of asking. It depends on fate. The rise and fall of fate. In fact, sometimes it is very simple, but sometimes it is as difficult as climbing up to heaven. The words of the master of Jingxin Monastery became more and more enlightened. Qin Wanru's curiosity seemed to be aroused. Her long and curly eyelashes fluttered twice. She raised her big black eyes and looked at the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery. I wonder if you could help me pass a message to Mingqiu Nun? What message? I want to ask Mingqiu Nun to teach me medical skills. Qin Wanru straightened her body, and the smile on her face faded, and her little face became taut and serious. It depends on fate. The master of Jingxin Monastery looked at Qin Wanru with a smile and said leisurely, and then reached out to pick up the 3 sticks of incense, handed them to Qin Wanru, and pointed to the incense burner at the corner of the table by the window. Go and burn some incense, and see if you have the fate. Qin Wanru stood up and took it respectfully. She walked to the incense table, lit the 3 incense sticks, and inserted them into the incense burner. Her eyes involuntarily fell on an open book on the table. It was a medical book, which was different from the one she had read before. After her rebirth, Qin Wanru had read that medical book for a long time and was very familiar with it. She basically remembered it, so she could tell that this book was different at a glance. But the binding of this book was very similar to the one in his hand, and in several places it was exactly the same. This is the next dungeon? Qin Wanru turned back to look at the master of Jingxin Monastery and asked. Although her previous medical book did not mention the first part, the page that she turned to was obviously more detailed than the one she had. Moreover, Qin Wanru had never heard of the herbs that were accompanied by pictures and pictures on the page. Compared to the book in his hand, this medical book was a little more profound. The master of Jingxin Monastery looked at Qin Wanru quietly, and suddenly laughed happily after a while. Her eyes fell on Qin Wanru kindly. That medical book, have you read it? Qin Wanru returned to the rush cushion and sat down. She sat up straight respectfully and said, I have read it carefully. What do you think? The master of Jingxin Monastery asked with a smile. I really want to learn medicine. Qin Wanru stretched out her hands on the ground and respectfully expressed her intention to the master of Jingxin Monastery. She came today for this, and she was determined. Chapter 72. Since you want to learn medicine very much, then show some sincerity, said the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery. After finishing her words, she curled up the corner of her mouth and glanced at Qin Wanru meaningfully. Then she slowly closed her eyes, pinched the Buddha beads in her hand and began to recite the scripture. It seemed that she didn't want to talk more with Qin Wanru. A nun came in and put her hands together in front of Qin Wanru respectfully. Second Miss Qin, please. Looking at the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery who seemed to be meditating, Qin Wanru reluctantly said goodbye. Out of the door, Qin Yu hurried to catch up with her and said worriedly, Miss, why are you looking for the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery? Nothing. Qin Wanru stood at the door and shook her head, but she didn't leave. She looked down and faintly saw a grassland. If she walked a few steps further, she should be able to see the corner of the hut. Qin Yu also saw it. When she was about to say something, she was stopped by Qin Wanru with a smile. Qin Wanru turned around and walked out. Her watery eyes slightly narrowed. Did the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery want to see her sincerity? The medical book on the desk? Her medical book? 2 medical books that were obviously a set? What did this mean? Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. The medical book on the desk should be the key. After she asked about the next book, obviously the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery became more and more friendly. Did this mean that she approved of her? It was not enough to only have the approval of the Reverend of Jingxin Monastery. If she wanted to be apprenticed to Mingqiu Nun who had better medical skills, she still needed to get the approval of Mingqiu Nun. On the way back to the fragrant room, Qin Wanru had been thinking about this problem. When she sat down, she frowned. She suddenly remembered that the medical book was taken away by Chu Luchen. Where was the elusive Chu Luchen? It was easy for him to find her, but it was not easy for her to find him. How could she find Chu Luchen? This was the most important problem now. Was he still in her mansion? Qin Wanru couldn't be sure. After thinking for a while, he decided to talk to his grandmother. If there was anyone else in the mansion who might know about Chu Luchen, Madame Dowager was the most likely one. When Qin Wanru arrived, Madame Dowager's medicine was ready. Taking the medicine from the little servant girl, Qin Wanru sat on the stool in front of the bed, blew on the medicine liquid, and carefully fed the medicine to Madame Dowager. After that, the servant girl took the medicine bowl, and Qin Wanru picked up a handkerchief on the side to gently wipe Madame Dowager's lips. "Grandmother, why isn't Aunt Shui here?" Putting down the handkerchief, Qin Wanru looked around curiously and asked. "Shui Rulin was usually here at this time. I asked her to go down the mountain to prepare," Madame Dowager said with a smile. She seemed to be in a good mood, and her voice was not as hoarse as before. "Going down the mountain now?" Qin Wanru asked casually, and suddenly her eyes lit up. She took Madame Dowager's hand and said happily, "Is Aunt Shui going to marry into the mansion?" "Yes, your father has agreed. Just in a few days. Anyway, I have nothing to do here, and Zhuozhua is with me, so I asked her to prepare. After all, it's a legal marriage. Although it's a little rushed, the etiquette can't be ignored. I'm afraid that your Aunt Shui is not sensible, so I asked Nanny Duan to go down the mountain." Madame Dowager smiled, reached out to touch Qin Wanru's hand, and said kindly, "From now on, you will follow Aunt Shui, and let your Aunt Shui protect you. Originally, I could also protect you, but I'm old, and I'm afraid that your future marriage will also be controlled by others, and you will suffer for the rest of your life. I dare not be careless." Qin Wanru lowered her head slightly, hiding the coldness in her eyes. In the last life, her marriage was controlled by Madame D, and because of the past events in Jiangzhou, her marriage was full of twists and turns. Engagement, annulment, annulment again, annulment again, annulment again, annulment again, annulment again, annulment again. After 3 annulments, even a woman with a good reputation would have her reputation completely collapsed, not to mention that her reputation was ruined from the root. Madame D controlled her marriage with the identity of her mother, and in the end, no one married her, and she was hastily brought into the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion in the name of marriage. "Grandma, this time we have Aunt Shui. Don't worry, with Aunt Shui and me, we will be filial to you, and you will definitely live a long life." When she looked up again, Qin Wanru was already smiling, and reached out to hold Madame Dowager, with a face full of admiration, which made Madame Dowager's eyes bitter. This child was so sensible, how could Madame D do such a vicious thing to her? "Grandma, are we going back to the capital?" Qin Wanru's thick and long eyelashes fluttered twice, and asked with a smile. "Zhuozhua is so smart, it should be soon, your father's transfer order should come." Madame Dowager nodded, and a smile appeared on her face again. At least now it was not too bad, and she was relieved to let Rulin raise Zhuozhua. Rulin was a co-wife, although a little lower than Madame D, at least she was a legitimate wife, and it was possible for her to protect Zhuozhua. Someone from the capital came to send the news? Qin Wanru shook Madame Dowager's hand, and asked coquettishly, and her big black eyes made Madame Dowager feel sad. "Zhuozhua, don't worry, it should be true." Madame Dowager thought that Qin Wanru did not want to stay in Jiangzhou, because so many things had happened, so she comforted her. "Grandma, why are you so sure that someone from the capital came?" "Someone came?" Qin Wanru blinked her eyes cheerfully and said, Madame Dowager laughed and reached out to touch her head. Even if she was not her own granddaughter, Madame Dowager also felt that she loved her to the bone. This child was beautiful and cute, and usually a little naughty, but she had a sense of propriety, and never had any bad intentions. "Who is it?" "Grandma, tell me who sent the news." "Duke Yong's mansion?" Qin Wanru said coquettishly. Seeing that she was young and ignorant, Madame Dowager smiled casually and said, "Not only Duke Yong's mansion, but also another powerful noble in the capital came to send the news." Because of Madame D, Madame Dowager did not have a good impression of Duke Yong's mansion. "Someone from the capital came to the capital? Is he living in our mansion?" However, Qin Wanru looked curious today, and it seemed that she wanted to get to the bottom of it, but this was completely like a child's innocent questioning. He lived in the mansion for a period of time, and now he left. Of course, Madame Dowager could not tell such an important thing to a child, so she just said vaguely. Qin Wanru's heart beat fiercely, and her face turned pale. Did he really leave at this critical time? Where did he go, Grandma? Did the person from the capital go back? Qin Wanru blinked her eyes, and her long eyelashes almost brushed Madame Dowager's palm. He didn't go back. I heard that he is in the farm, but I don't know the details. This is your father's business. You are just a little girl. How can you ask so many questions? Madame Dowager reached out to touch her forehead gently and scolded her with a smile. Madame Dowager knew a little because Qin Huaiyong accidentally revealed some information, but Madame Dowager actually did not know the real identity of Chu Luqian. Although Madame Dowager's words were scolding, her voice and movement were very gentle and had no effect on Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru acted like a spoiled child and talked with Madame Dowager for a while. Seeing that Madame Dowager looked a little tired, Qin Wanru left. She walked outside and then ordered a few servant girls and old maids to serve Madame Dowager in a low voice, and then left. Chu Luqian came to her room last night and left early this morning. Was the so-called farm near Jingxin Monastery? She suddenly remembered that her father had a farm in this area. In the past, when she accompanied her grandma to Jingxin Monastery to recuperate, her father would spend the night in a nearby farm. Qin Yu, do you know where my father spent the night when he came to Jingxin Monastery late in the past? Qin Wanru thought for a while and asked. There was one time when her father left late, and Qin Yu even sent him out of Jingxin Monastery. I know. General is resting in a manor in our mansion. I have asked the manservant beside General, and he said that General lives in a manor at the back of the mountain. Qin Yu said as she followed Qin Wanru to go out. Do you know the way? Qin Wanru was relieved, as long as Chu Luqian did not leave. I know a little but not all. I used to send General to an intersection in the back of the mountain of Jingxin Monastery, and I saw a yard from afar, but I don't know if it is that one. Qin Yu said after thinking carefully. That time, she did not actually send General to the yard, and the General asked her to stop from afar. Go and have a look. Qin Wanru had made a decision, and turned to the back of the mountain of Jingxin Monastery. Chu Luqian didn't know why he came to Jiangzhou, nor did he know when he would leave. If he really left, where could she find him? That medical book was the key for her to learn medicine, so she couldn't lose it. Yes, miss. I will take a look in front, miss. Don't go there. Qin Yu nodded, trotted a few steps to catch up with Qin Wanru, and led the way in front of her. Although she did not know what Qin Wanru was going to do, since Miss said so, Qin Yu naturally obeyed. She now had 100% trust in Qin Wanru. The master and servant went to the back of the mountain one after another, and took a detour to a path in Qin Yu's memory. They passed through the woods, and saw a yard in the distance. The yard of the farm was not big and looked very calm. The wall was not high, and it was not much different from the yard of the incense room in Jingxin Monastery. Qin Wanru walked to the door, and even saw a few sticks of smoked meat hanging under the beam, which was similar to the common families who were going to celebrate the new year. The only thing that was not in harmony with the plain yard was a handsome young man in a red brocade robe. He sat on the only big chair made of nanmu in the yard, rocking the chair with his eyes closed, and looked very relaxed. There was a book in his hand, and the book looked familiar. Qin Wanru recognized it at first glance. It was the medical book that was snatched from her hands. The young man's features were exquisite, and he exuded an air of elegance. However, the bright red brocade robe made people feel that it was inexplicably much richer. This made the handsome young man who walked out of the inkwash landscape seem to exude a nobility that came from his bones. It was a kind of enchanting and elegant nobility, but it was very harmonious, as if he had always been like this. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.